So I will call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of August 28th, 2023 to order. First, we'll get some information from our technical facilitator. Jesse?
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After all register and speak, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. First, we'll go to disclosures and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Alder Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to disclose on agenda items 5 through 9 regarding the University of Wisconsin's agenda items. I've been part of the planning meetings for some of those, and my department would potentially benefit from this. So I will be recusing myself from those 4 or 5 items as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Field.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to disclose that UW-Madison is my employer, but I work in general administration and not in any of the units proposed to occupy the building. So my vote on these items will not be impacted by my relationship to the applicant, and I don't stand to benefit from the development of that building.
Okay. Thank you, Alder. Okay. Moving on.
Chair.
Yes.
I should probably also disclose that I'm a UW employee, and the same goes for me.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner McCahill. Any other disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, we will go to agenda item 1, Legistar 60306, which is public comment. And we do have one public comment registrant, Terrence James Harvey, Byron Center Avenue, Wyoming, Michigan, and he marked neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Do we have a registrant by the name of Terrence James Harvey?
Chair, I don't find a person by that name.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Next, we'll go to the minutes of the August 7th, 2023 regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Alder Field.
Second.
Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Commissioner Mendez.
Yes, Chair, I will abstain. I was not at that meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other abstentions? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously except for the abstention by Commissioner Mendez. Upcoming meetings. we have a regular meeting on September 18th and October 2nd and October 30th at 5:30. Those will be virtual meetings, and a special meeting on Thursday, September 7th. That will be at 5 p.m. And that will also this time be a virtual meeting. Okay, next we will move to public hearings, and first we will do the consent agenda. It's the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. So those items are placed on a consent agenda along with any referrals, and they are addressed at the beginning of our meeting. Of the items before us today, the following are identified for the consent agenda. Agenda item 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then for referral, agenda items 10, 11, and 12. And then for the consent agenda, agenda items 15 and 16, 19, 20, and then for referral, agenda item 21, and for the consent agenda, agenda item 22. Are there any requests for separation by any of the commissioners? Seeing no raised hands for separation of any of the items, I will read the items then into the record. So note that agenda items 5 through 9 are related, and so they are one public hearing. So agenda item 5, Legistar 78199, 209 Bernard Court, and 911 Clymer Place, District 8, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 residential buildings. Agenda item 6, Legistar 79460, 923 Clymer Place, District 8, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a 2-family residence. Agenda item 7, Legistar 78874, amending sections of the Madison General Ordinances to amend the Campus Institutional District Master Plan for the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus for the portion of the campus generally addressed as 232 North Park Street and 915 through 935 West Johnson Street, 8th Alder District, to include specific plans for the proposed Levy Hall Academic Building. Agenda item 8, Legistar 78912, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 923 Clymer Place and 207 North Brook Street, 8th Alder District, from traditional residential urban 2 district to campus institutional district. Agenda item 9, Legistar 78913, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 209 Bernard Court, 911 Clymer Place, and 908 West Dayton Street, 8th Alder District, from traditional residential urban 2 to campus institutional district. And then for referral, agenda item 10, Legistar 78643, agenda item 11, Legistar 78911, agenda item 12, Legistar 78642. And they are being referred at the request of staff with no date specified. Then also on the consent agenda, Agenda item 15, Legistar 79017, 1233 Regent Street, District 13, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an auto repair garage. Agenda item 16, Legistar 79016, 1233 Regent Street, District 13, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for a multifamily dwelling with 49 to 60 units, and consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district and transit-oriented development overlay for a building taller than 4 stories and 60 feet in height to allow construction of a 5-story, 50-unit apartment building. Agenda item 19, Legistar 78633, 660 South Whitney Way, District 19, consideration of a conditional use in the regional mixed-use district for a vehicle access sales and service window, and consideration of an alteration to a conditional use for a planned multi-use site containing 40,000 square feet or more of area, of which 25,000 square feet is designed or intended for retail, to convert a restaurant tavern into a bank with vehicle access sales and service window. Agenda item 20, Legistar 79015, located at 4757 Hayes Road, District 17, consideration of a conditional use in the commercial corridor transitional district for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 60 units to convert a 3-story motel into an apartment building with 135 units. And then for referral, agenda item 21, Legistar 79018, and this is referral to September 18th, pending a recommendation by the Urban Design Commission. And agenda item 22, Legistar 79021, located at 1115 Rutledge Street, District 6, consideration of a conditional use to construct an accessory building on a lakefront lot. I will open the public hearing, and since there are no registrants wishing to speak, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Heck. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, moving on then. The next item we will consider agenda items 2 through 4 are related and will be considered as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission shall make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. Agenda item 2, Legistar 78192, located at 18 through 30 North Carroll Street, District 4, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 commercial buildings and a museum. Agenda item 3, Legistar 78194, same location, same district, consideration of a conditional use in the downtown core district for a new building greater than 20,000 square feet, or that has more than 4 stories to allow construction of a 5-story museum. Agenda item 4, Legistar 78225, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Wisconsin Historical Foundation located at 18 through 30 North Carroll Street, District 4. First, we will hear from staff member Chris Wells. Chris?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission. The applicant is requesting approvals to allow the demolition of 3 buildings and the construction of a 5-story museum. Due to the larger floor-to-ceiling heights, the proposed facility is just under the maximum capital height limit. Plan consistency considerations are included in the staff report. The downtown plan recommends height up to the capital height limit for the site, along with a mix of such as employment, retail, entertainment, cultural, and residential uses. Additionally, the plan specifically identifies this as a recommended area to, quote, concentrate cultural venues, unquote. Staff believe the development is consistent with the building form and land use recommendations for this area. In regards to key issues, the staff report provides discussion of various historic value considerations. As part of the consideration of the demolition standards, the Plan Commission is required to consider the report of the city's historic preservation planner regarding the historic value of the property, as well as any report that may be submitted by the Landmarks Commission. The staff report contains many of the city's preservation notes on the sites, as well as the historic notes submitted by the applicant's team. As noted in the report, while historic preservation staff recommended a finding that there is, quote, historic value related to the vernacular context of Madison's built environment, but the buildings themselves not to be historically, architecturally, or culturally significant, unquote, while the Landmarks Commission found that the buildings, quote, have historic value based on cultural and historic significance and as the work/product of architects of note. In reviewing the demolition standards, staff note that historic value is among the different considerations that the Plan Commission must consider. The recent changes to the demolition standards removed approving the proposed use as part of the consideration of demolition requests and established 7 specific standards, with the key findings found in Standard 7 that states, quote, the Plan Commission shall consider the factors and information specified in items 1 through 6 and find that the proposed demolition or removal is consistent with the statement of purpose of this section and the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the city of Madison, unquote. In applying the standard, staff advised that the Plan Commission carefully consider the required information and advisory recommendations and make findings make findings related to the demolition section statement of purpose and broader findings related to the overall health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the city. While the Commission must consider the reports and advisory information, the Plan Commission is ultimately the deciding body on demolition requests. Since adoption of the revised demolition standards, there have been instances in which the Plan Commission approved and denied demolition requests that were found to have historic value by the Landmarks Commission. Staff note one error in the August 28th staff report. On page 9, it notes that the UDC's motion for initial approval on August 16th was unanimous. However, there were no votes in opposition. It should be noted that Alder Rummel abstained from that vote. Finally, staff note that there are a few changes proposed within the public right-of-way, both along West Mifflin Street and North Carroll Street, such as the removal of street trees. Staff note that these proposed changes, i.e. future site planning and placemaking within the public right-of-way, are part of a separate review process and one that has not formally started up yet. That said, the applicant's team has met numerous times with city engineering, traffic engineering, metro, and forestry to discuss the proposed changes and talk about process moving forward. Staff do note that the applicant will be required to maintain pedestrian and bicycle access along both streets during construction. In summary, staff recommend that the Plan Commission approve the demolition of the 3 commercial buildings if it can find the demolition standards met. The Planning Division recommends that the Plan Commission find the conditional use standards met and approve the request for a new building greater than 20,000 square feet and more than 4 stories in the in the downtown core district to allow a 5-story museum. Finally, should the other aspects of the proposal be approved, the Planning Division believes the technical standards for land divisions can be found met and recommends that the Plan Commission forward the certified survey map to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval. And these recommendations obviously are based on the input at this meeting and the conditions in the staff report. Thank you, and I will answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Chris. We do have several registrants. I will open the public hearing The first person we will hear from is Wes Mosman Block, State Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing the Historical Society. I will note that there are 3 registrants who wish to pool their time. So, and that is also Montiel Crowley and George Austin. So they will get 9 minutes altogether. And Wes, you will start out.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Wes Mossman Block. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Director of the Wisconsin Historical Society. And thanks for the time this evening. The Wisconsin Historical Society was founded in 1846 with a mission to connect people to the past by collecting, preserving, and sharing stories. And we've done that over the past 177 years. And the Society has grown to be one of the largest, most active state history organizations in the nation. The project that we're talking about today represents our next chapter. The new Wisconsin History Center will serve our state and region for the next 100 years. This purpose-built facility will allow us to provide much needed and much greater public access to our collection. Through exhibitions and programming, it will allow us to expand the stories we share. The center will be the Society's new front door and flagship location. It will more than double our permanent exhibit space and provide 8,000 square feet of rotating gallery space. It will triple our capacity for school students, allowing us to serve the nearly 70,000 students that travel to the state capitol each year. The center will contain retail space on the ground floor, a cafe on the mezzanine, and a community gallery on the second floor, allowing us to tell the stories of local communities. The lobby, grand stair, programming spaces, and outdoor terraces on the 4th and 5th floors will provide extensive opportunity for programming, events, and public engagement with the state capitol, Capitol Square, and Mifflin Street Plaza. The Society's worked for over the last 20 years to make this project a reality, and for nearly all of that time, the preferred location was the site that we're talking about tonight. For much of the past decade, the project was envisioned to be a public-private partnership that would have occupied most of Block 75 and would have required the demolition of the Churchill building in addition to the 3 buildings we're discussing tonight. In 2018 and 2019, the Society held listening sessions throughout the state about the project. In multiple sessions in Madison, we heard concerns about the potential impact of the project on the Churchill building. In 2020, we reassessed our plans for the History Center development, including the proposed site. We analyzed 4 locations, eventually pursuing a plan for the project on East Washington Avenue, but those plans did not come to fruition. In the fall of 2021, we were presented with the opportunity to purchase the properties at 20 and 22 North Carroll Street. We moved forward with this opportunity, which allowed us to plan for a Historical Society-owned building in a museum-built facility that did not impinge on the Churchill building. In conjunction with purchasing the 2 Carroll Street buildings, the Society researched 20 and 22 North Carroll Street and the condition of those buildings to assess their historic value. Today, we're pleased to be at this point with a project that was fully remunerated in the 2023-2025 state budget and is ready for Plan Commission approval. There are 3 decision items in front of the Commission today: demolition permit, conditional use permit, and approval of the survey map. With respect to the conditional use permit, we believe we have met the requirements for this approval. The City of Madison 2018 comprehensive plan defers to the 2012 downtown plan with respect to criteria that must be addressed for development within the downtown core. And the staff report notes the downtown plan states that the continued expansion of mixed uses such as employment, retail, entertainment, cultural, and residential will help ensure that the downtown core remains a popular destination beyond normal business hours. In addition, the arts, cultural, and entertainment section of the downtown plan specifically recommends this area for museums and similar cultural uses, including a recommendation to concentrate cultural venues near the top of State Street. The History Center perfectly aligns with the downtown plan and delivers an ideal project for the top of State Street. Today, we're also requesting a permit to demolish 3 buildings, 20 and 22 North Carroll Street and 30 North Carroll Street, which is the current Wisconsin Historical Museum. We believe we've also met the standards of approval that must be met for the Commission to provide a demolition approval. I will briefly touch on each of these. The first standard requires the applicant to include information related to any efforts to relocate the building. The Society has not attempted to relocate 20 and 22 North Carroll Street buildings. They are 0 lot line buildings. They share a party wall, and they're of such a size that relocation is impractical and extremely challenging. Further, incorporating the existing buildings into the new facility footprint is also infeasible. For instance, the required floor loading and needed ceiling heights to mount exhibitions do not meet the standards for a museum facility. The second standard requires the applicant to have received a certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Commission, if applicable. The 20 and 22 North Carroll Street buildings are not designated as City of Madison landmarks, nor are they adjacent to a City of Madison designated landmark building. Receipt of a certificate of appropriateness is not applicable in this case. The third requirement requires the applicant to have received an approved reuse and recycling plan from the city recycling coordinator. An approved reuse and recycling plan will be submitted to the city recycling coordinator prior to reconstruction and demolition. We are in the middle of discussions with the State Historic Preservation Office about mitigation associated with the demolition of 20 and 22 North Carroll Street. One of the mitigation steps we're discussing relates to the salvage of brick and potentially other material. And a final mitigation plan will inform the reuse and recycling plan. The fourth standard requires the Plan Commission to have received and considered the report of the city's historic preservation planner regarding the historic value of the property, as well as any report that may be submitted to the Landmarks Commission. The city's Community and Cultural Resources Planner issued a report for the Landmarks Commission on May 12, 2023 for the Carroll Street properties. Staff recommends the following findings on the 3 buildings. For 20 and 22 North Carroll, the City Cultural Resources Planner found that the buildings have historic value related to the vernacular context of Madison's built environment, but that the buildings themselves were not historically, architecturally, or culturally significant. And the City Cultural Resource Planner found that 30 North Carroll had no known historic value. The fifth standard requires the Plan Commission to have received and considered the report of the City Forester regarding the impact of a proposed building relocation and the impact it could have on the city terrace trees. We've met with the City Forester to discuss the impact of the proposed demolition and construction of the History Center project multiple times on the city and the impact on the city terrace trees. The final standard requires the Plan Commission to consider the condition of the buildings proposed for demolition or removal. The Society conducted a study of 20 and 22 North Carroll Street in conjunction with purchasing the buildings for the History Center development. And in that study, we found that in the 120 years since their construction, both buildings have seen frequent modifications at the street level, and the interior spaces have been significantly changed over the years. Little of the original plan materials and finishes remain. And while the buildings have had a presence on Capitol Square for a long time, they are not on the National Register of Historic Places, and they are not city landmarks. So while the buildings certainly have had a long history, we determined they do not meet the criteria of historic designation. The State Historic Preservation Office has concurred with this determination under their Chapter 44.40 review, and it's the same determination concluded by city staff. So in conclusion, we believe the standards have been met, and we respectfully request approval from the Plan Commission for this once-in-a-generation project. We have appreciated the city staff's support and guidance throughout the design process. We have the full support of the Evers administration, the legislature, Capital Neighborhood, DMI, and many others from across the state, and we can't wait to open this new attraction for the citizens of our great state. And with that, I'll hand it over to Montiel.
Montiel Crawley, New York Avenue, Washington, D.C., support wishing to speak, representing the Smith Group. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we just had a brief presentation, but I think we're a little tight on time. I think Wes did a great job at summarizing everything that's important to the conversation right now. But one additional thing I would like to add is really just as we look at the design of this building, right, we're really trying to create a beacon for downtown Madison that really starts to activate, the intersection of Carroll, Mifflin, and State Street with this bold and welcoming presence of a new history center. And you can see in the design how it really starts to create and signify the entry point to Madison's cultural district that's set out in the city master plan for this location. And again, as Wes mentioned, we've been working with SHPO, and they feel that this design has done a really great job incorporating its surrounding context and really in its relationship to the Churchill building and how we've kind of set the marker between the two and defined the two buildings and being respectful to one another. But with that, I don't want to take up any more of our allotted time, and we're happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Montiel. That concludes the available 9 minutes. Our next registrant is Linda Lennertz, South Patterson Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Linda, you have 3 minutes.
Hello.
Hello.
I oppose the demolition of these largely intact historic buildings. The Downtown Historic Preservation Plan identified 12 South Carroll through 22 North Carroll as an area that should be designated a commercial preservation review area due to its retention of a, quote, significant collection of older buildings with a scale and urban texture that add greatly to the pedestrian and aesthetic interest of the downtown area, end quote. Only one other section of the downtown received the same proposed designation. A large part of that stretch of Pinckney has already received demolition approval. Thus, this is the only area that retains that scale and urban texture. The plans to expand the History Museum date back to 2018. As was said back then there was an intent to do a larger project with residential on the upper floors. These properties were purchased in 2021, which in some respects may have been a bit presumptuous. The end of West Mifflin is going to be extended into the plaza in order to accommodate the loading dock. This will decrease the plaza by about 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. That may not sound like a large loss of public open space, but the downtown was short of open space many years ago, and with all the new residents, that shortage has become worse. And this relates to approval standard number 7. The B cycle station will not be replaced. It has 7 bikes. 1/3 of the bikes available within a 1-block radius. The Churchill building was built in 1915 and was Madison's first skyscraper. The north side of the Churchill building, which is currently visible from stories 4 to 9, will be entirely blocked due to the shared wall agreement. The windows on the north side of the Churchill building will be fully blocked. This would seem to violate the demolition standard number 3, that the uses, values, and enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood for purposes already established will not be substantially impaired or diminished in any foreseeable manner. The site was chosen in large part because the state already owned 30 North Carroll, based on past reports, which would reduce the cost. Now other state property is available in South Webster. It would take less than a quarter of that property to house the museum. It's only a block from the square. The shininess of the building materials might be more appropriate at that location. And just because a developer wants to do something on a particular site does not make that development appropriate for the site. And this has been going on for a while, and can understand why they want to keep going with the same plans, but it's a bit ironic that the Historical Society is willing to just largely dismiss historic buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. The next registrant is Bob Kleba, East Gorin Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Bob, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners and staff. First, I want to say that I'm on satellite internet. So if I stop talking or appear to stop talking, just wait until the next satellite gets into position. As you know from the comments I sent in last week, I oppose the demolition permit requests. I'd like to add a few more comments relating to the staff report and existing city plans. First, let me remind you that even though the materials presented to the Commission mix 3 different agenda items, I would like you to focus on agenda item 2, which addresses the demolition permit. The 28-page long staff report discusses the demolition permit on 2 pages from 6 to 8. Let's focus on those 2 pages. The staff report relies heavily on the applicant's materials. What was lost in the staff report is the Landmarks Commission's evaluation of the buildings as significant and meriting preservation with respect to their context. These buildings are not landmarks. I will agree with the applicant. However, George Washington did not sleep at 20 and 22 North Carroll. But these buildings have defined the character of the Capitol Square and the first four blocks of State Street for more than 100 years. As I said in my comments, they define an iconic and historic part of what people understand as Madison. A quick comment on city plans. The downtown plan cites uniqueness of buildings downtown and to build on their character. The comprehensive plan recommends preservation of historic and special places like the Capitol Square and State Street. Demolition of the contributing buildings at 20 and 22 does not follow these plans. I want to emphasize that adaptive reuse is important to the preservation of our historic architecture. The previous owner of 2022 North Carroll worked hard to update his buildings with modern amenities while preserving their historic character. It is unconscionable that the applicant should argue that adaptive reuse has made these buildings unworthy of preservation. I need to remind the Commission that you recently denied a permit for 3 buildings on the 400 block of State Street. These buildings and those on North Carroll bookend a significant part of our city's iconic and historic architectural history. 2 are in much better shape than those on the 400 block. There is no justification for their demolition from an engineering or use perspective. I encourage the Commission to consider the demolition permit without the prejudice of the proposed development as your defined policy and state law require. Please focus on the preservation of this important part of what makes downtown interesting and attractive. I ask you not to approve the demolition permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Our next registrant is Kevin Pomeroy, located on Iroquois Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appear to be on. Hello. Thanks to the Planning Commission for this opportunity for public comment on item 2 regarding the demolition permit for 18 to 30 North Carroll Street. I'm Kevin Pomeroy, Madison resident and the president of the Crawford Marlboro Nakoma Neighborhood Association. I have degrees in both architecture and urban planning and over 35 years of professional practice in historic preservation, architectural design, building construction, and city planning. For 10 years, I was the design coordinator of the Wisconsin Main Street program, where I worked on hundreds of buildings, just like the 2 early 20th century commercial buildings at 20 and 22 North Carroll Street that are slated for demolition, if the permit is approved. It was almost 2 years ago that I posted the proposed renderings of the Wisconsin History Center in the Historic Madison Facebook group. And to this day, it's a very active thread with over 400 comments, mostly negative, and nearly half of the feedback is sad or angry. Last year, I also testified to Wisconsin Historical Society Board of Curators regarding the widespread concerns about this project. The Wisconsin Historical Society started the History Center project with the assumption that the buildings at 20 and 22 North Carroll would be demolished. So very predictably, that's exactly what the architects designed. I can't think of anyone who believes the existing museum at 30 North Carroll should be preserved, but the other 2 buildings are a completely different story. The masonry is in excellent condition, and the storefronts have been painstakingly replaced. I encourage you to read the letter in your packet from Daniel Douglas, whose great-grandfather built one of these fine buildings and used cast iron columns from the Kupfer Foundry in Madison for the storefront, which are still visible and intact today. As a former employee of the Wisconsin Historical Society, I'm frankly shocked that the Society is passing up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to illustrate their mission of connecting people, and I quote here, connecting people to the past by collecting, preserving, and sharing stories. And what could be more authentic than incorporating the actual buildings at 20 and 22 North Carroll into the History Center to tell the story about early city life in Wisconsin and the rich history of Main Street commerce and the building trades. I strongly urge denial of this request for a demolition permit. Thank you for your time, and I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you. We will do questions after everybody has testified. The next registrant is Daniel Douglas. Ammerman Circle, Madison opposed and wishing to speak. Daniel, you have 3 minutes.
Here we go. Yes, my name is Daniel Douglas. I am the great grandson of the builder that was one of the builders of the 20 and 22 North Carroll Street. George S. Kinnair Construction and Kupfer Foundry were the ones that put those buildings together. He has had 6 buildings he built many buildings in the downtown area, and he built some other buildings on the square that have been demolished already. These are the last 2 of his buildings on the Capitol Square. I really find it ironic that the Historical Society would take history away by demolition of what life was like in the early 1900s. Those buildings have held a special place in my heart, and as well as many of our relatives that still reside in this city. I just think this is the exact opposite of what the Historical Society should be doing. And if nothing else, I know these buildings are old buildings, but I know the facades in those buildings are very, very structurally sound. And I think that if nothing else, incorporating those facades into that building would be really a great part of the history of this great city we live in. And it could be used as gift shops, snack bars, whatever, to be able to have people walk in and see what early 1900 was like in Madison, Wisconsin. I really strongly oppose the demolition of this. I feel like a little toad on a stool because there's so much money involved in this. And I've reached out to our legislators and people in the Capitol to try to say, hey, if you're going to supply money, let's make sure we're doing the right thing in our historical preservation of Madison, Wisconsin. That's all I have.
Thank you, Daniel. And again, we'll take questions after all have testified. I don't see anybody else that wishes to speak, but there are some that would be available to answer a question. Yes, Heather?
We do have 5 additional registrants on a page before where you began. And
oh, okay. Sorry.
Off if you'd like, or if you have that handy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry. I did miss those. I'll go ahead and go for that. Linda Scott, West Mifflin Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Capital Neighborhoods, Mifflin District. Linda, you have 3 minutes, and I apologize again for missing those registrants. Linda, 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Chair Zellers and Commissioners. I'm Linda Scott, the new chair of the Mifflin District of Capital Neighborhoods, Inc. We appreciate that our neighborhood has this opportunity to provide input to the planning process for the proposed Wisconsin History Museum. I'm speaking in support of the project on behalf of our neighborhood and want to share some of the comments made by community members during the last of several public meetings we had with the developers. We find the architecture creates a uniquely identifiable landmark that at the same time fits into the scale and character of the area. The high quality, durable building materials proposed for the project add visual interest and contribute to the evolution of our downtown. The rotation of the upper floors provides a more interesting and memorable structure, while also reducing the building scale and preserving views. The museum has a strong corner presence at this very special corner of our city. The steering committee expressed a strong interest in the design of Mifflin Plaza, also known as Philosopher's Grove, and of the Carroll Street frontage. We encourage the architect to create an area that is functional and humane, making a connection between an engaging street side and the history within the building. We urge the designer, whether it's the city project or by this design team, to provide a creative design that reflects the building's architecture and mission, preferably with the use of native plants. And particularly relevant to the discussion today about item 2, the demolition, there was a very positive reaction to the location of the Wisconsin History Museum being just across State Street from the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. The proximity of the two museums is further reinforced by the downtown plan's recommendation to concentrate cultural venues near the top of State Street, as discussed in the staff report. In conclusion, I want to reiterate CNI Mifflin District neighborhoods' strong support for the new Wisconsin History Museum as proposed, including the demolition of 20, 22, and 30 North Carroll Street. We urge your support for this exciting project that will benefit the city of Madison and the state of Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. The next registrant is Sandra Ward, West Mifflin Street, Madison, neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Sandra, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, Chair and Commissioners. I am here to speak about trees. The commission has an incredibly difficult task in front of it with complex issues. One that I think deserves more attention is the tree canopy in the area. I urge you to save the roughly 22 trees in Philosopher's Grove and on Carroll Street. Based on the report submitted by Smith Group to the Streets Division, it appears that virtually every tree in the location will be destroyed. This destruction should not be allowed for many reasons. The downtown tree canopy is already at 23% when it should be 40% or more. Madison is experiencing a rapid rise in average temperatures, making canopy tree cover ever more important, particularly for future generations. Urban heat islands damage the health, well-being, and aesthetics of a community. Such islands are created by removing trees. Removing existing trees and replacing them with new growth retards by many, many years the recovery of the lost canopy. The History Center developers should put their substantial talent and expertise to work in favor of saving trees and finding an alternative way to stage the construction project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandra. Our next registrant is Carrie Rothberg, Lakeside Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Carrie, you have 3 minutes. Jesse, is there some technical problem with Carrie?
Yeah, I am waiting on an unmute. I have 2 people registered under the same phone number, but I do have a Carrie. Have allowed you to speak on our end. All you have to do is unmute yourself.
Carrie, you're unmuted on our end. Can you find the unmute button on your end? Okay, let's move on.
Oh, just one more instruction, Carrie. On the phone, if you can press *6, that would unmute you.
Ah, very good.
I've been pressing *6 repeatedly. It finally worked. Thank you very much for your patience. I do not have a lot to say other than I support the comments of Bob Kleba and Linda Leonard. I thought they were very thorough, and I am continually struck by the irony of a city that chooses to say that it values its history while destroying the buildings that we can never bring back. I mean, perhaps it is simplistic to say one of the things so many of us in the U.S. aspire to is to travel to parts of the world to see what civilization was like. We go to Europe, we go to the Middle East at the same time that we seem to think nothing of the context of buildings in our own home. I was part of the effort to save the Wonder Bar several years back. And in something like under a week's time, we received 3,010 comments from people supporting saving a building far less significant in some ways than these. I think that while we need a historical museum and should have one, this is the wrong location. And I think that the people of Madison understand that in a way that perhaps those who are our decision makers and those who are our developers do not. We love the city we live in, not just for its new buildings, but for what has been here all along. And we want to retain the context of what has been here so that we can feel a connection to the past. That is all I have to say.
Thank you, Carrie. Our next registrant is Lizzie Kitchell, Potter Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. You have 3 minutes.
That was a mistake on my part. Lizzie Kitchell asked me to register for her because she was out in the field, and I put she did not want to speak. So I don't want you to keep asking that and wasting meeting time. My apologies.
Okay, thank you. The next registrants, let's see, is Donald Schott, Geneva Circle, Madison, in support, wishing to speak. He said he's speaking on behalf of himself, but he is a member of the Board of Curators of the Wisconsin Historical Society. Donald, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I am a 40-year resident of the city of Madison. That's not including the years of college that I spent here. And although I live on the west side of Madison from 1983 until late last year when I retired, I've worked on the Capitol Square my entire professional career, so I'm very familiar with the area. As you mentioned, and as I mentioned in my note, in 2017, I was elected to be a member of the Board of Curators of the State Historical Society. That's the governance board, and I'm currently serving as the president-elect. I think Wes and others have demonstrated why we believe we've complied with all the standards for the demolition permit, but I'd like to just briefly comment on why we think this application will contribute to the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the city of Madison, which is one of the standards. The new History Center will be a fantastic cultural addition to the Capitol Square. It will bring thousands of people from across the state and across the country to our beautiful city. We have raised tens of millions of private dollars and received substantial bipartisan support from the governor and the legislature because people from across the state are excited about this project. As several people have mentioned, the mission of our society is to connect people to the past by collecting, preserving, and sharing stories. And the new History Center will allow us to do that in an unprecedented scale, particularly the sharing of stories. It will allow us to share stories of the natural history of this beautiful state. It will allow us to share stories of the role that so many of our people have played in forging the economic, political, and cultural landscape of our nation. It will help us share stories of what defines us as a people, stories of our past mistakes and our successes, stories that show our differences, but also our commonality, and many other stories. It will also allow us to excite new generations of Wisconsin young people about our shared past and the lessons it holds for our future. And speaking primarily as a citizen of Madison, it will provide yet another beautiful meeting place to add to the vibrancy of downtown Madison. So for all those reasons, I urge you to approve the permit applications before you and make this exciting dream a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. The next registrant is Samantha Farrell Folger, West Mifflin Street, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. representing the Smith Group. Robert Barr. Did we hear from him? Jefferson Street, Milwaukee, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Representing the Department of Administration. Ivo Rosendahl, East Mifflin Street, Madison, support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Also representing the Smith Group. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. Question for anyone from the Wisconsin Historical Society team. Have you considered or had discussions about preserving the facades of 20 and 22 North Carolina?
Why don't we turn to Wes Block? And Wes, if it should be somebody else, let us know.
Sure, I can start and then maybe ask Montiel Crawley to chime in. You know, we've had discussions, but from throughout our design process, you know, we're focused on the next 100 years and creating a history center that's going to meet the need of our audiences, and really in a building that is designed to engage the citizens of our state, be a beacon that people want to come into, that's for people to see themselves in this design. And while we certainly looked at the options for retaining the facades, really that's not, in a sense, you know, preserving these buildings. It's and we instead focused on, you know, designing the best project we can for the future. Montiel, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit that right on the head. You know, we've also walked into, you know, the State Historical Preservation Office and identified components we intend to salvage from the interior, and hopefully we can find some from the exterior as well. But sorry.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers Commissioner McCahill's question. Thank you very much. Did you have any follow-ups, Commissioner McCahill? No. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions for the development team, kind of more nuts and bolts questions. Can you describe how the loading dock area would work? I recognize that it's in the same location as the current loading dock, but it seems that it might be a lot bigger a portion of that top of that little cul-de-sac on West Mifflin that will potentially be impacted by larger trucks. I honestly go through that intersection many times a week, and I've never noticed loading trucks there. So I'm kind of just interested in what your plans are for the loading dock area.
Wes, do you want to take that one, or somebody else on your team?
Give that one to Montiel.
Yeah, I can handle that one. I assume you all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so there currently is no loading dock on the existing building right now. Most of the things come out through the shared alley space, but we are proposing a new loading dock at the western corner of the building. That's at the most southern edge of Mifflin Plaza. And from there, we have devised a plan where a 26-foot box truck is the largest truck that will come into the building. Anything larger will be delivered at the safe building that is that contains all of the artifacts and storage for the existing historical society, and it will be broken down there into smaller trucks that can be delivered to our site. And it's been arranged in such a way where it's at the most southern edge of the plaza, where trucks can back in over the rolled curb and not disturb any of the trees within the plaza.
Okay, because that was my next question. I actually would like to just follow up on some information, and questions that we have heard about trees. Is there any possible alternate staging area for construction that would not require taking out what it looks to be every single tree that's in the adjacent to the building? Did you look at options? Are there options?
I can start off by answering that, and I don't know if Samantha or Bob Barr would like to chime in as well. But we are at basically a zero lot line condition, and we front Carroll Street, which is a major street that is always active, and then we have the plaza, which is next door to the existing site. And honestly, we tried to find other locations, but there are no other locations to really stage with enough space for a contractor to get in and to erect a new structure, whether it's a 30,000 square foot building or a 100,000 square foot building. There's really only one location for it to happen. The only other place we could do it would be on Carroll Street. We'd have to shut down all of Carroll Street, and I don't think that would be favorable to the city.
Samantha, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would just like to add that the trees in the existing plaza, while creating a nice canopy with their density, have a reduced longevity due to their current sub-terra system, which is just in ground. We've worked with forestry to look through alternatives, and they're in support of removing the trees and providing a terra support system similar to a silvicell that would allow the roots to actually expand to greater capacities with different soil volumes that are in excess of what there is there today. So the hope would be a better and happier canopy that we would put back in its place.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Commissioner Shepard.
Well, I think Alder Bennett was before me.
We take Plan Commission members before others.
Okay.
So
okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I didn't want to jump the line here. Could the development team continue their explanation? I think it was West or Montel, start to talk about how elements of the existing buildings might be incorporated on the interior of the new development. Can you talk about that, if there would be any sort of recognition of the past in terms of the reuse of some of those materials?
Sure, I can start that off, and others can chime in if I miss anything. But yes, we are looking for elements within the existing buildings that we can salvage and bring into the new history center and different spaces for interpretation. We're looking for different architectural elements, whether it's cornices or windows or other elements that we can start to bring in and perhaps salvage. Maybe there's even an opportunity to salvage some of the flooring. But we are looking for that. Part of the plan is to do an extensive documentation of every space within the building and look for those items that we can potentially, again, bring in to interpret and to talk about, what was once here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Bennett.
Hi. Okay, I have a few questions, so please bear with me. First, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about why the specific preservation of the buildings didn't work out. Like, did you make attempts to use the current building space, or can you address some of those concerns, please?
Sure, I can start that off. Again, right, we're trying to create an extension of the public realm and create a space that is welcoming for all of Wisconsin and to acknowledge all of Wisconsin. And the current facades of that building are very very retail oriented, and the proportions of them are very limiting. For like the last 35 years, there's been a debate in museums and museum design about creating museums that actually are welcoming to people. And how do you do that? And the way you do that is not creating these fortress-like buildings that were once done through the 80s and early to late 90s. And so we're trying to shift that paradigm of what a museum is now. You can even look at the existing history center there, right? It was once a retail building, and while it does a great job at telling stories within itself, the architecture is not a very welcoming space. So that's why the Historical Society really wants to reinvent and reimagine what museums are, what storytelling is, and how you can make that accessible to everyone in Wisconsin from different cultures and different backgrounds and different histories and different stories. Also, when you look at kind of the scale of the existing facades and the way the programmatic portions of the interior break down and the way that it has to stack out, because we have a vertical, essentially what is becoming a vertical museum, because we're landlocked with where we are, right? We have a zero lot line condition. So the only place we can really expand is upwards. And so the way that the core of the building has to lay out functionally, and the way that the rest of the spaces have to radiate around that, keeping the other facades don't work out with the spaces that are behind them, and what you end up with is something you're trying to force yourself into a box, and you create a lot of problems that can't be solved in the interior of the building. And we try to approach this from an inside out point of view, and it doesn't always work out the way we would like to, or the way you want the building to work out if we kept some of those facades. And you end up, and we also don't want to create what feels like a Disneyland kind of facade, right? We want to be honest to what's happening there. We don't want to create these fake facades where it feels like a false sense of reality. Again, I guess Disney World is kind of the best way I can describe it, for lack of a better definition. We want to be true to what's happening within the building and the stories that the building is telling.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So next, can you tell us a bit more about how you all engaged the 12 tribal nations of Wisconsin and how you incorporated feedback from them into this design?
Sure, I can.
Just like overall, proposal.
Sure. I don't know, Wes, if you want to start off with kind of how the society has been engaging the tribal nations.
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually a tribal nations council that's been formed to give us formal feedback on our design, and as well as the exhibits. So for years, we've engaged the nations through consultation, and there's been several meetings, actually in the last month or so, to actually go through the specific plans and then the design, and we're getting feedback on individual spaces and rooms and aspects and architectural aspects that are important to the nations. And it's been just a tremendous process. Until.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we've had several design meetings with them as well, getting their feedback on the exterior conceptualization of the building, and getting their buy-in on that, and then how we can also represent tribal nations on the interior, whether it's with tribal seals, or there are other ways that we can think about representation and interpretation for those tribal nations. And also, again, getting feedback on specific spaces like reflection room spaces, areas for tribal nation members to come in and have smudging ceremonies. And then the ideas of how we can bring water, perhaps as whether it's symbolically or physically, into the design of the building, along with the incorporation of indigenous plants within all of our terrace spaces and our green roof area. So we've been valuing all of the input they've been giving us, and that is a continued conversation that we keep having. So we're creating this feedback loop with all the tribal nations as well, to make sure that we are acknowledging and honoring the cultures and heritages, and making sure that they feel like they are represented within this space.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Alder. Are there any further questions of any of our registrants? Any further questions of any of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, are there questions of staff? Are there any questions of staff? seeing no raised hands, we will then make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. The first one is in regard to the demolition permit. And I would remind commissioners that under our ordinances, we are not supposed to be considering future use. All we're looking at is demolition and whether the buildings should be demolished, and agnostic as to whatever the future use is. And I see that Alder Verveer has his hand raised, so we'll listen to Alder Verveer before we go to, do you still want to speak, Alder Verveer? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Zellers. And traditionally, this is the time that you thought was best for the alder of the district to speak, as I recall, is right before the motions are made. So good evening to you and the commission, and appreciate the time as always to share my thoughts about this application that is located in the Aldermanic district I'm elected to represent. As you can imagine, I have had numerous conversations with the applicant and their previous partners, namely Hovde Realty, over many years now. As you're all aware, this is mentioned during the public testimony. This is a project that is many, many, many years in the making. And I have to admit that the 10 block of North Carroll Street has always been a difficulty in my analysis of the plans over the many years. Namely the incorporation of the historic gay building, Madison's first skyscraper, as was mentioned earlier in the testimony, renamed when it was most recently purchased, the Churchill building. It was extremely concerning to me, and I know many in our community, when earlier incarnations of this proposal included the proposed demolition of the historic gay building. And I'm pleased that is obviously not a part of the demolition request before you. With that said, I do mourn the loss of historic resources on North Carroll Street, namely 20 and 22 North Carroll Street, of course. And it is that mourning of the loss of those couple buildings that I do have regret about. But I must say that I am celebrating the proposed new history center. So in my estimation, on balance, I do support agenda items 3, 4, and 5 before you. The demolition permit, the conditional use permit, and the certified survey map. Let me elaborate further about the perhaps two most controversial aspects of this further, please. Those being historic preservation, or the lack thereof, and the issue of potential tree removal. First, the bigger issue for most, and certainly based on the testimony this evening, is the demolition request. I'm well aware that we updated our demolition ordinance not that long ago, only a few years ago, and know that each of you commissioners is very much attuned, more than I have, as I've never served on the commission, to the 7 demolition approval standards that you're bound to follow. Obviously, I'm also well aware, as Chair Zellers was saying before I began speaking, that the future use cannot be part of that consideration. If that wasn't the case, I frankly think it perhaps would be a no-brainer that a new history center is worth the trade-off. But with that all acknowledged, I do take extremely seriously the recommendation of the Landmarks Commission of last May that you have before you, that they have made a finding of historic value. Although I realize that is not a set precedence by this commission, that if that recommendation is made by the Landmarks Commission that in the past you've denied demolition permits. Obviously, I know it's gone both ways. Also, I'm very well aware of the preservation planner's report and her recommendation to the commission, to the Landmarks Commission. Standard number 7 is obviously the one that I'm sure all of us are looking at or thinking about tonight. And I do believe that the application is consistent with the health, prosperity, safety, and welfare of the city, of our community. And I say that because I do believe that the existing historic buildings there that have been under the tremendous stewardship of the Mose family for so many decades, including the 1998 remodel, which I worked with Fred Mose on, of those 2 buildings, does not mean that a demolition, with the demolition standards, particularly standard number 7, cannot be met. I believe that they can be met. Obviously, people have difference of opinions. We heard some very heartfelt opinions on both sides this evening, and in the written public comment, I have tremendous respect for my friends that spoke in favor of preserving 20 and 22 North Carroll Street this evening and in written testimony. I just happen to believe that it can be viewed differently, as is mentioned in the planning staff report. Although perhaps there's a conflict of interest, I don't need to remind you all that the SHPO office, the State Historic Preservation Office, a report was issued that finds no adverse effect of the demolition and is recommending mitigation efforts that I have every reason to believe the society is taking seriously and will follow through on. Additionally, as I say, although perhaps you shouldn't think about this, I can't help but think back to the work of the Downtown Historic Preservation Task Force. It was the very first city committee I ever served on way back in the 1990s before I was elected to the council. And over many, many years, we worked very hard and indeed came up with a unanimous, as I recall, recommendation that this collection of buildings on the 10 block of North Carroll Street warrants protection. But for whatever reason, that never occurred. And that's the reality of the situation. I probably don't need to remind you all that 20 and 22 North Carroll Street are neither local landmarks nor state or listed on the state or national registers. Not even the Madison Trust for Historic Preservation has weighed in officially, to my knowledge, on this application before you tonight, because I believe reasonable people can disagree on this, and indeed are very much disagreeing on whether or not this demolition permit perhaps should be issued, not perhaps so much the other requests that are before you relating to this proposal. I do believe that it is the greater good for the community and the state and indeed the nation, thinking of how many national and probably international visitors I'm sure that the Historical Museum receives annually. It makes so much sense to have the museum at this location where it has been for its past history. I know for a fact, as I mentioned at the outset, from my work with the development team, including a development team that was much larger than what ended up being a totally state project, that they did an exhaustive search of the best sites downtown, some that have been publicized and some that have not been publicized, that my consultation was sought on over the years. And perhaps it is ironic, as several have mentioned, that it's the State Historical Society that is asking for permission to remove these historical resources at 20 and 22 North Carroll Street. But I do believe that it is for a much higher and better purpose. And we'll also mention that as it relates to the demolition standards, although you can look at different recommendations and adopted plans, my go-to has always been since 2012 the adopted downtown plan. And I know that you can look at different adopted recommendations in that document, depending on how you feel about the demolition application. But demolition of these buildings, perhaps in my estimation, can also be argued or supported by the downtown plan. Recommendation 208, adopted by the council, argues for a concentration of cultural venues at the top of State Street. Indeed, this and the current plans of the Wisconsin Veterans Museum are the pillars of that recommendation that we adopted many years ago. Generations of students and folks of all ages have visited the Wisconsin Historical Society, and that will continue to be the case. It makes so much sense for their home to be on the Capitol Square. So many then visit other cultural institutions there on the square, like previously mentioned Veterans Museum, the Children's Museum, and MoCA, and of course the state capitol, as it relates to all of those school children from all corners of the state that visit annually and make the pilgrimage to the historical museum and the state capitol. This is going to be just so transformative for all of the future visitors for generations to come. And so then, though, as I say that I mourn the loss of the historic resources with regret, I do celebrate the new History Center, because I think it is just going to be such a monumental, transformative new cultural institution for the community and the whole state. Let me quickly pivot to the issue of the trees and provide some information that I've not heard yet tonight. First, to acknowledge that our relatively newly minted city forester, Ian Brown, has been in your meeting since the start of the meeting and is available to answer questions, although I know we've moved past that normal staff question period at this point. But I also want to point out his email in the record relating to his initial determination that he believes the 26 existing public street trees can be removed because of the greater good of the future promise by the applicants to install some sort of, as you heard from their landscape architect, suspended terrace soil system like Silvacell. That's been a part of the equation since the early conversations with city forestry, and that I know is the commitment of the applicant. The new information that you might not be aware of is that city staff are planning to redesign the public right-of-way areas around the proposed new History Center, led by some city planners in the planning division. We recently had a discussion at the last City Downtown Coordinating Committee meeting about this, and some of the talented city planners are beginning their work on what a new reimagined, Philosopher's Grove, as some of you know, we call the area between the existing museum and Teddy Wedger's building, and what that would look like. The extension of granite planters with street trees on North Carroll Street, the replanting of numerous healthy trees in the current Philosopher's Grove is all part of the study that's now underway by city planning staff. They plan to make regular reports and ask for feedback at the Downtown Coordinating Committee. And then, of course, as you all are well aware, on the commission, the Board of Public Works and the Common Council, will likely have final say on all the treatments in the public right of way and what this applicant's obligations will be legally. But I do want to point out and very much associate my remarks with the testimony of Sandy Ward and the written testimony of Grace Hassler, two downtown residents that are very concerned, and rightfully so, about the loss of our urban forest or tree canopy in the downtown area, and want all that share that important concern to know that we are hoping that there will be a much healthier tree canopy on both sides of the history center that is approved and built. So with that, thank you for the time, Chair Zellers, and as always, happy to answer any questions if there are any by the commission.
Thank you, Alder Verveer. Are there any questions of Alder Verveer before we move on to our motions? Seeing no raised hands. So we will move on to the motions. And again, we will have separate motions for each one of these items. And do keep in mind, because it's very difficult, it's kind of unfortunate that we are prohibited from considering future use. So the things like on balance or higher and better, unfortunately, we really can't consider that for the demolition. So do I have a motion on the demolition? Alder Figueroa Cole.
So I put a motion forward to start the discussion, correct?
I'm sorry?
We just get the motion in to start the discussion?
Yes, get a motion in and then we can discuss.
Or I'll give this a try. Okay, so I move that the Plan Commission finds the demolition standards are met and recommends the approval for the demolition of the 3 commercial buildings located at 20 North Carroll Street, 22 North Carroll Street, and 30 North Carroll Street. Please let me know if that's the complete motion.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field. Alder Figueroa Cole, did you wish to speak to your motion?
I would like to hear the discussion of the more seasoned people in the committee first. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I think based off of what was in the reports, it seemed like the development team had not paid as much attention to reusing the existing buildings. I do believe tonight that they explained that they're still looking at that and they're looking to incorporate it. So I think that helps alleviate, for me, part of that standard fuzziness that we had with the landmarks submission, noting that they have historic value. So I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes.
I'm not going to have tech issues tonight.
Yeah, you're good.
I appreciated everybody's comments about the historic, the way that they value the buildings. I can appreciate that, the age of the buildings, how they fit in with the vernacular on the square. I've lived in Madison for several years. I can appreciate that they, fit in the square. I've been going to the square for many years here. I appreciate the comments. Thank you for coming. I like the feedback. And, I did struggle with this a little bit, but I did appreciate the Wisconsin Historic Society's representatives' perspective on potentially losing the buildings and how, representing history and telling Wisconsin history's story, really isn't just a building and isn't just a facade. It's the other artifacts and, the other things that we can potentially see and hear and experience while we're in this new building. And I don't mean to diminish the buildings and say that it's just a building and that it's just a facade, but it's balancing that, we might lose the building, but we might gain more experience and, more other things to see and hear. And and for other people to experience while they're here by getting this new center. So I really appreciated that perspective, and it makes me feel a little bit better about this potential motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'm just going to probably give a muddling input here, but I first wanted to recognize what Alder Verveer mentioned about, I'm not sure if these were his exact words, but essentially reasonable people can draw different conclusions in this situation. And the input of folks who opposed the demolition, I think, was really valuable. And certainly there are many people who are supportive of the demolition. And we didn't hear from many of those tonight, but certainly folks that seem to be in favor of the entire project are supportive of the demolition. I just wanted to also recognize that our standards of approval do have wiggle room in them, built into them, and this is one of those tough situations where we really have to make a decision, and it does bring back the recent memory of the demolitions that we voted against on State Street in the 400 block. It's a fairly analogous situation, but right now I'm kind of thinking that it's not the exact same situation, because the Landmarks Commission in both cases gave their red light recommendation to us concerning the demolitions. But in this situation, that contradicted the input of the city's preservation planner, who wanted a yellow light recommendation. I know you all know this, so I'm thinking out loud, but so there's a slight difference there in that in the State Street situation, the preservation planner did not give input, whereas she did in this situation. And then we also have the input of SHPO, as Alder Verveer mentioned, which is not the Historical Society, but certainly related. And so I lean towards supporting this motion because of those differences. They're also two different locations and different buildings, so it's never exactly the same, but it's certainly analogous. Those are the end of my musings, I guess.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Any further comments before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Now we need a motion on agenda item 3, the conditional use. Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the Plan Commission approves the conditional use for Litchstar 78194 at 18 to 30 North Carroll Street, with all of the conditions from staff.
Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Commissioner Mendez, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Any comments, input, discussion on this motion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand, motion passes unanimously. Next agenda item 4, Legistar 78225, on the certified survey map. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Mendez.
I move that the Plan Commission forward the approved certified survey map to Common Council for approval.
I didn't catch all that. You said with a recommendation to approve. Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Spencer. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Mendez? No. Okay. Open for discussion or comment. Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand, the motion passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is our items 13 and 14. They are related and will be considered as one public hearing. And then again, we would make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. So agenda item 13, Legistar 78197, 3913 Lean Road, District 3, consideration of a conditional use in the Commercial Corridor Transitional District for a car wash and consideration of a conditional use of a major alteration to an existing planned multi-use site per MGO section 28.137 paren 2 to allow construction of a car wash, and agenda item 14, Legistar 79049, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Club Car Wash Operating LLC located at 3913 Lean Road, District 13. First, we will hear from staff member Chris Wells. Chris.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Plan Commission. I will keep my comments this time far shorter. The applicant proposes to construct a two-story, roughly 5,400 square foot car wash facility, which will include a tunnel-style car wash. Regarding the impacts on neighboring sites, provided that external impacts to this development could be controlled and managed so as not to make surrounding properties undesirable for mixed-use development, staff believe that that conditional use standard 3 could be found met. And I would note that there are several requirements from zoning to include fencing, 6-foot solid fencing along the northeast and southeast property lines, and in addition to landscaping. While staff believe that the establishment of this auto-oriented development is a less intensive use compared to what is recommended in adopted plans, the use as proposed is not precluded by the recently adopted TOD ordinance. On balance, staff believes the development could be found to meet the underlying conditional use standards and land division standards. And lastly, staff note that the proposal was granted final approval by the Urban Design Commission at their meeting on August 16th with conditions. And those are noted in the staff report. And with that, I would be happy to take questions after the public hearing.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Justin Barnes, East Main Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Club Car Wash. Justin, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Justin Barnes. I'm the Vice President of Development for Club Car Wash, and was wanting to kind of give you a background of who we are and what we do. Club Car Wash was originated in 2006 as a family-owned business. And as of last week, we just opened up our 137th store. So we've had tremendous growth in a short amount of time. And currently we are expanding our bases in Wisconsin. We stretch all the way from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, kind of up the I-35 corridor, all the way up to a recently opened store in Green Bay. We currently have 6 stores that are operating in Wisconsin, and feel as though Madison is a great underserved market that we would like to bring our services to. We would like to use this area, honestly, as a good central market that we've got, that we can use the facility for training purposes, as well as provide a clean, shiny, dry car to Madison residents. We have a little bit about what we do. We are a conveyorized car wash. We have employees on site at all times, 3 to 4 employees that consist of 2 prepping employees, 1 sales consultant that you'll see Mr. Schmidt gives his presentation later, and then a manager that's there that at all times from 7 to 7 during the winter months, and during daylight savings time 7 to 8. So we do have employees on site at all times. Another item I would like to hit, Club Car Wash has always taken a lot of pride when we come in on grand opening events and really trying to make a good footprint and get along with the communities that were there. We do a lot of fundraising. We do some grand opening fundraising. We've got ongoing fundraising, which we call $10 Tuesday, where we donate certain proceeds to the Children's Miracle Network. Bouncing back again a little bit to the operations of it, Club Car Wash with the express conveyorized wash is we've got retail sales, and then we've also got membership bases. And you'll see where we're able to flow our traffic very well that will go to the membership bases that come around on our site, and also allow the retail members to use the wash in a very proficient way. And I think you'll see that the way that we've got the site laid out really makes that efficient. This is, kind of a typical design that we do, that we use to once again get the traffic cars in and out of our service and provide that quick, speedy wash that we take pride in doing. With that, I will give it to Ms. Kate Duncan. She's our attorney for the project.
Our next registrant is Kate Duncan, East Main Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, also representing Club Car Wash. Kate, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and Plan Commissioners. My name is Kate Duncan. I'm here with my colleague Amy Harriman, and we are with Quarles and Brady, and we represent Club Car Wash in connection with the applications for conditional use and CSM for the property at 3909 and 3913 Lane Road. Applicant has reviewed the conditional use approval standards, the TOD overlay district requirements, the zoning code supplemental regulations for a car wash, along with all other Madison ordinance requirements, and applicant believes that it meets all required standards and ordinances for approval of the conditional use and the CSM. Applicant has also reviewed the Madison Comprehensive Plan and the Greater Easttown Area Plan and believes that the proposed car wash conforms with the adopted plans. Applicant would like to offer some additional analysis to support the concept that the car wash use is compatible with the Comprehensive Plan, the Neighborhood Plan, and the TOD Overlay District. First, in the underlying zoning of CCT and the TOD district, a car wash is an allowed use on the property as a conditional use. The applicant must meet all approval standards for the conditional use to be approved, and if those standards are met, then a car wash is allowed. The Comprehensive Plan and the Greater Easttown Area Plan classify the property as community mixed use, which encourages a mixture of uses, and that can include a car wash. There's nothing in these plans which prohibits or precludes a car wash as being part of the mixed uses that are encouraged. Club Car Wash considers itself a support service. It is a convenience for cars that are already in the area. Club Car Wash selects locations that are in trade areas. They want to locate where there are already existing businesses where people will be coming. They specifically look for destination retailers like grocery stores to locate next to, since people are already going to those locations. In the case of this particular property, there's an existing Hy-Vee grocery store and an existing Aldi grocery store, both essentially within the same parking lot as the proposed property for the car wash. People going to Hy-Vee or Aldi can stay on internal access drives and get to the car wash site. There's also a Target just to the southeast of the property, from which applicant believes it will also draw customers. Applicant does not operate in a way that seeks to increase vehicle traffic. Rather, applicant seeks to locate in areas where there are already convenient, established destination retail uses, which is why this location was appealing and why this location will remain appealing, even with the implementation of TOD district principles. The applicant will also have its regional offices and headquarters in this building, meaning that the building will function not only as a car wash, but it will also be an office for employees who will be working in the region and will be a home base for regional and district managers in Wisconsin. Establishing this as not only a car wash site, but also as a regional office allows applicant to broaden its use of the site in a way that's compatible with the comprehensive plan. Mr. Wells went through several of the conditional use approval standards with you, which I would also like to just briefly address, specifically standard number.
Thank you, Kate. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Jared Schmidt, Centennial Center Boulevard, Hobart, Wisconsin, in support wishing to speak, representing Club Car Wash. You have 3 minutes,
Very
Jared.
good. Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate Justin's introduction to Club and the operation systems, Kate's summary of the technical ordinance compliance that we fall within. And I'm hoping, Chris, if you can start up with the presentation that we shared. I'm just going to briefly walk through the site as well as the site operations. Assuming we pop up a site plan here shortly. Our subject site is located in front of a recently redeveloped or recently reapproved conversion of a hotel to a residential use. We are located along East Washington between Lean Road and Mendota. As you see, Highway 51 is just off to the side. As we move forward to the next slide, a zoom up of the site shows us in, again, close proximity to the site. The site itself has some logistical challenges with it being quite depressed from Washington Avenue. That's an important characteristic we want to carry forward into our site development. The next slide shows two really quick pictures of the site, largely vacant. There's some odd pavement routes through the site that are cross-access between Lean Road and the Hy-Vee parking lot. And as we move into the next slide will be our proposed site plan. Within the process and working closely with staff, appreciate their support as far as getting us a discussion and moving us forward to compliance with your codes. Building is positioned in close proximity to Washington, primary entrance facing Washington. And then from a circulation standpoint, as we move what we'll call south to north, with north being Washington Avenue, we've got our bypass drive lane that connects the Hy-Vee parking lot to Lean Road. We've got our pay route. This is where we have availability for 14 cars to stack behind the pay window. And this is where our members enter without restrictions, or you can buy memberships or individual washes. Next is our vacuum area where our cars are parked to vacuum, as well as our 4 stalls for staff parking. And then for those corporate events, should people choose to come by vehicle, would park in the vacuum stalls as well. The building itself is positioned in that close proximity, is in 2 stories in height. So we really spent a lot of time on layout and configuration, ensuring that our vehicles have easy flow in and around the site, primarily using the backage road, and then are fully contained within the site itself because of a really strong capacity analysis and just the overall positioning and placement of the building and the site features. On the next page, we will see our landscaping plan. Through the process with staff review and UDC, we have added a fence along the south and east property line. Our hope is that the fence that is perpendicular to Washington can be reduced in length. The applicant is also
Thank you, Jared. That concludes your available time. Thank you. That concludes the speakers or those available to answer questions for this item. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Shepard.
Hi. Could they briefly just talk about sort of security on the site? Will they have full-time staff there? Those sorts of things. Thank you.
Justin, did you want to take that? And if not, let us know who could. So security on the site.
Sure. We are manned. They are employees on site during business hours. And once again, that's from 7 to 7. But of an evening, there is security, just regular security systems that we have that are tied in with central dispatch there. But I hope that answers the question. We do have employees on site during operation hours there at all times.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. One, for a typical peak time frame, which I would assume probably Saturday morning, how many vehicles do you typically see queued up beyond the 14? Since you're so close to East Wash, traffic concerns would be part of our worry.
Justin? Justin, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to let Jared Schmidt answer that. He's probably got better information for that than I do.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Jared?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes, from a usage standpoint, when we look at layout, the 14 behind the pay booth is also in addition to 10 or 12 that fall between the pay booth and the building. And then we can have up to 5 or 6 cars within the wash at the same time. So when you look at the 14, that's kind of stage 1 with the line as well as in the structure, another 15 that gets you to 30. We can then queue an additional 10 to 15 within the property itself before it even spills to the private drives that are surrounding the property. So when we look at capacity on site and we look at usage, our wash generally processes a vehicle every 30 seconds. So at that stage, we have strong belief that we've allocated enough stacking and staging as illustrated, in addition to those that aren't illustrated, to be able to manage and keep any vehicles off of the public right of way. Also being manned, we're able to adjust and flag the way that people are using our site. Right now, we've got essentially 2 access points to the private drive that feeds the Hy-Vee parking lot, is that we can close one of those parking lots and we can direct vehicles around or past the site. And then they would have to circle and either come back or, return when the wash is less busy in the event that there is extreme congestion. But we feel that the layout and the configuration would accommodate the peak demand on whether that's Saturday morning after snow events, things along that nature.
Okay, thank you. So my second question, I forget the person's name from Quarles and Brady, but they mentioned that this was going to be a location for potentially regional office and a training site. And I see there's a small office in here. Is that where everybody would be? Yes. Looking at the elevations, is there potential to switch how the glass is on the south side to the north side, which would kind of line up more with our utility overlay with that second level density?
So were you looking for Kate Duncan to reply to that, or?
Possibly. I don't know if Jared, because it's kind of an operational question, but Kate was the one that.
You can take it, Jared?
Yeah, I would take that one.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. Chris, are you able to share the building elevation, page 6 of our slide by any chance?
Sure, 1 second.
Thank you. Yes, to answer your question, so the north elevation is the elevation that fronts Washington. As Chris pulls it up here, it'll give us a little better clarity. There you go. That'll work out perfect. Page 8 is good. So our primary entrance is to this north side. Our second story windows are to the north side. The south side that faces the residential does not have a second story windows. And what we did, and actually some changes we made since the UDC, was we elevated the second story to make it a little bit more functional. That upstairs has an office that has some storage, and then also has additional space for offices and that regional training facility we talked about. So by bringing the windows as originally presented, were about 1.5 feet off the ground. Now they're 2 feet off the ground and 4 foot high. So it really gives you that presentation to Washington and brings that density and overall scale. You know, our building's approaching 35 feet tall. UDC had suggested we adjust the architectural features on the roof lines, as well as some of the building material pieces. But really what we wanted to do is get up on that street and fall in line with what your code requests and requires of this higher use density building, and again, being able to offer that opportunity to club for some expanded uses within your city.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions? Okay. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. So when you say regional, can you please define what you're referring to? Are you expecting people from the Wisconsin area to come for training and spend the night, or are you talking about a larger audience?
Chris, can you take down the picture, please? Thank you. Okay, go ahead, please, Jared.
Sure. So as Justin had mentioned, this is we have 6 operational sites in Wisconsin. We're looking at 5 to 7 additional sites currently, doing some sites in Northern Illinois in the Rockford area. And the hope is that this becomes kind of that regional hub. As Justin mentioned, I mean, they reach from Texas up through the north side of Wisconsin into the Twin Cities. And we're trying to create those kind of sub-regions, and this is hopefully that location to support the Wisconsin operations, the Northern Illinois operations.
Thank you.
Any further questions of any of our registrants? Any further questions? Seeing no raised hands, I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion. Alderfield.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move to place this application for a conditional use permit on file.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner McCahill. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Alderfield?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. And excuse my cat. She's also speaking to my motion. I find 2 standards to be unmet when considering this proposal compared to the goals of the Greater Easttown Area Plan and compared to the goals of the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District. The staff reports section on conformance with adopted plans says, in regards to the use itself, staff do not believe that this establishment of an auto-oriented use, such as a car wash, is the intensity of use that is encouraged by the adopted plans. The auto-oriented development itself is not believed to significantly complement or directly support transit in this area. End of quote. So first to standard 4, it reads, the establishment of conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses in this district. So the staff report notes that the standard addresses impact that a proposed conditional use could have on the development pattern of improvements in the surrounding properties and should be informed by the specific aspects of the proposal. And then staff go on to advise the commission that we should address whether the establishment of this conditional use would impede the development on normal and orderly development of the surrounding properties. I am noting that the Greater Easttown Area Plan adopted last year repeatedly encourages, quote, improvement that supports walkable, bikeable, and transit-oriented development, end quote. That plan classifies this parcel and surrounding parcels as community mixed use, which supplement to the comprehensive plan of NFAQ document describes as a relatively high intensity mix of residential, retail, office, institutional, and civic uses, generally located adjacent to a major transportation corridor with 2 to 6 stories. And so I'm noting that the conditional use will, by definition, bring vehicle trips and vehicle traffic to this parcel and its access streets by the very definition of the service it provides, while also not supporting any other modes of transportation as outlined in the plan. This area is intended by the Easttown Area Plan to be for a mix of high intensity uses, and this will be a less desirable location for the development of additional higher intensity uses and of housing in particular, because of the lines of idling cars running contrary to the goals of the adopted plan. And I mean lines on the parcel as well as perhaps off the parcel in high use times after snow events, as the applicant mentioned. We, the community, have grand hopes for active uses in the neighborhood, amenities for this corridor that will be, I think, less likely with a large auto-oriented car wash on the site. The second standard that I find unmet is 7, stating the conditional use conforms to all applicable regulations of the district in which it is located. The TOD ordinance states that the TOD overlay district is intended to support, and I'm reading the ordinance itself, intended to support investment in and use of public transit and bicycle connections. It does this by fostering development that intensifies the land use and economic value around transit stations, which this parcel is near, and by promoting a mix of uses that will enhance the livability of station areas. It goes on to list 3 intentions of the ordinance. 1, provide increased mobility choices. 2, improve pedestrian connections, traffic, and parking conditions. And 3, foster high-quality buildings and public spaces that help create and sustain a long-term economic vitality. And so, as staff noted, the applicant did design a building that fits the technical dimensions of the TOD ordinance in its later provisions, so I don't object to the building itself. Car washes are an allowable conditional use in CCT zoning, which I don't dispute. However, I object to the fact that this use is auto only and auto only benefits auto modes of transportation, and does not support transit, which is contrary to and violates the goals of the TOD overlay ordinance. And this parcel falls within the overlay itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderfield. Are there further comments, discussion related to this motion? Further comments or discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And now we would be on to agenda item 14, Register 79049, approving a certified survey map. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Mendez.
Question. I believe we faced this the last time. We can approve this and the applicant can choose not to proceed with it, correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand your question.
Sorry. So we can approve the certified survey map and the applicant can choose not to proceed with it at the time, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Then I move that we approve the certified survey map for Register item 79049 for at the location 3913 Lee Road.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Did you wish to speak to your motion?
Okay.
Okay. Discussion, comments. Seeing none, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is agenda item 17, Register 78425, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Michael J. and Lisa Cook Schuster located at 7021 Cottage Grove Road, 16th Alder District. First, we will hear from Heather Stouter in regard to this.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, we don't have registrants on this item this evening, and I think my colleague Tim Parks did a great job of laying out the rationale for the staff recommendation in the staff report. But I just wanted to take a moment to summarize that, since we don't often see recommendations to place on file for the reason that it's simply not approvable. So this is a certified survey map that's been requested on the far east side in an area that's about a 20-acre piece of land, a triangular piece of land, about a quarter mile away from major streets in the area. And this particular property is not within the city's central urban service area, which means it does not have access to city sewer and water at this time. There is one single family home on the property, which is very common for these more rural areas on the outskirts of the city. And the applicant was hoping to subdivide the property into 3 separate residential lots for future development with single-family homes on the other 2 properties. Technically, from a technical standpoint, this is not approvable because the acreage of the proposed lots is too small based on our ordinances to support residential development in this type of area. So as Tim laid out in the staff report, our ordinances would have required at least a 10-acre property in order to develop a new single-family home. And that seems a little counterintuitive. We know that we are seeing a lot of dense development in the urban setting. We're seeing development far more dense than one single-family home on a 10-acre site. But one of the important reasons for this ordinance in the city is that we as a city want to have tools to protect our opportunities for future urban growth. And if the areas out in the outskirts of our city develop with really low intensity rural residential uses, we lose opportunities for future street connections, water, sewer, and frankly, urban true, city development and expansion at the housing densities and intensities and mixes of uses that are more appropriate for the city. So that's some of the rationale behind it. But again, the main technical issue here is that the lots proposed simply weren't large enough to meet our zoning standards. And that's why the CSM or certified survey map couldn't be approved at this time. One more point raised in the staff report is that even if the CSM could be approved, development of these lots with single family homes would be required to be served by urban services such as water and sewer. And that would be incredibly expensive for the owners and also simply not allowable since it's not in the central urban service area at this time. So this is it's a fairly simple and straightforward request. And I know it can be difficult to understand the rationale for why it can't be approved technically, but just again, wanted to take a moment and verbalize some of the highlights of Tim's staff report. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Heather, I see that we do have a registrant for this, Chris Casson, Sumner Valley Circle, DeForest, in support and wishing to speak.
Oh, great. Thank you for noticing that. That must have come in a little later. Okay.
Okay. So Chris, you have, and he's representing Mike Schuster. Chris, you have 3 minutes.
If you can hear me okay, everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think she said it pretty well. Pretty unique piece of land, given all the, the things against it, access, even though there is an access easement there and things like that. We completely understand the water and sewer. When we proposed, these lots, I think there was some confusion with Madison and Mike a little bit, to the point of the acreages and things like that with the types of zonings. And when we looked into it a little bit more, it was already kind of submitted and things like that. And when we looked into it a little bit more, we understood, the 10 acres and the 5 acres a little bit more. So I apologize for some of that stuff. But Yeah, I guess, just a couple of questions I have. Given the uniqueness of this property and things, does Madison, I don't want this to be a complete working meeting or anything like that, but does Madison have any recommendations with the ideas of, given the uniqueness of it being kind of a landlocked piece, and really until any further development happens, is there any way to conditionally approve some, or conditional use with there being existing home on there with septic, anything with a variance or anything like that that would allow for situations on this being such a unique piece. That's kind of really all I have to say. A little bit above it, just kind of he wanted to maintain kind of the rural agricultural, not so much agricultural, but rural feel of this. It's got a drumlin, it's got lowland, wetland. I think that Mike and Lisa were trying to kind of preserve all that and give kind of a unique area for residential homes. And that's where we're at right now, is basically just trying to see, are there avenues, are there ways, will Madison work with us, or is it cut and dry that because there is no water and sewer, and we completely understand the expensive aspect of that. Are there ways that we can make this work? I guess I'll just end with that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Heather, could the appropriate staff person reach out to Chris to answer the questions that he has posed here?
Yes, absolutely. We'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So then I would be looking for a motion. And I close the public hearing, by the way. Yes, Commissioner Mendez. Hold on. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. I move that we place agenda item 17, Legistar 78425 on file without prejudice.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Heck. Did you wish to speak to your motion? No. Okay. Any comment, discussion? Seeing none, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is that we will cover is agenda item 18, Legistar 78428, located at 1609 South Park Street, District 13, consideration of a conditional use in the commercial corridor transition district for a vehicle access sales and service window to allow a restaurant to be converted into a coffee shop with vehicle access sales and service window in Urban Design District 7. And I think we're hearing from Chris. Is that correct?
I'll take this one.
You're taking that one? Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. And I want to thank our colleague Lisa McNabola for reviewing this proposal over the past couple of months. I'm going to do my best to walk through the basics of the proposal, and Chris and I, and also importantly, Assistant Zoning Administrator Jacob Moskowitz will be here to take questions if there are questions from commissioners. So the proposed use that the Plan Commission has before them here at this site, 1609 South Park Street, is for re-establishment of a vehicle sales and service window, otherwise a drive-through, otherwise known as a drive-through, on the property. We have an existing building with physical infrastructure that supported a former drive-through that's more than a year lapsed. And so there's no approved use at this time for a drive-through facility at the site. The applicant is proposing building a building addition, as well as a reconfiguration of the existing interior of the building and changes to the exterior to support a new coffee shop facility that would have a vehicle sales and access service window. There has been a lot of confusion, and it's completely understandable. Since we just passed the transit-oriented development district, which this does lie within, how are we seeing a one-story drive-through There are some important distinctions when it comes to existing buildings, and Jacob can speak to that perhaps in more detail. But when there's an established physical infrastructure already on the site, they have to do quite a bit less with regard to meeting the transit-oriented development standards. And so it's not necessary that they construct a second story on the building, things like that, et cetera. And the existing location of the building on the site can remain, even if it doesn't meet the transit-oriented development standards. So it has been a tough review, I think, for our colleagues in zoning, but the proposed layout of the site and drive-through does meet zoning standards. That's the interpretation of the zoning administrator. And it also meets the standards of traffic engineering. And so you'll see typical standards of conditions of approval in your in the staff report from zoning and traffic engineering. A couple other things I wanted to mention that I think are really important. In the staff report, you noted that at the time the report was authored, the applicant was not planning on providing any walk-up service opportunities. And so what that means is that this would have been a drive-through only establishment with no opportunities for pedestrians, transit riders to walk up to the facility and order, basically engage with the business. My understanding, based on a late afternoon conversation with the applicant, is that they're reconsidering that, and I'll let them discuss more on that issue. We do, after very careful review, we agree, or we as staff feel that the conditional use standards can be met. I think that Lisa did a good job of laying out detail on standards 4, 5, 7, and 9 for the commission to take a look at. And staff does recommend 2 sort of out-of-the-box atypical conditions of approval. One related to conditional use standard 4. We want to make sure that any cross-access easements that this owner has with adjoining properties will not preclude redevelopment of adjoining properties consistent with the transit-oriented development ordinance. And so there's a staff condition related to showing any and all cross-access easements for staff review prior to final staff sign-off. And then also, with regard to conditional use standard 5, and this is related to the adequacy of circulation on the site for vehicles and especially pedestrians in this case, staff does have a condition of approval to provide a marked crosswalk on the eastern side of the property across the drive aisle to the rear sidewalk abutting the building. And the applicant's aware of those 2 conditions. Again, while it is, rather confusing due to the fact that this is a collection of changes to an existing site and building, the site does meet the zoning standards for transit-oriented development. The Urban Design Commission has provided their final design approval for the proposal before you as well. And I want to mention one other important finding. Just today, this afternoon, we recognized that the yellow sign that should be posted for any public hearing at the Plan Commission was not picked up by the applicant and posted on the site. As many of you are likely aware, there's been a multitude of public comments. I think that the awareness about the proposal is very strong, but I wanted to mention that the Plan Commission can legally act on the proposal absent that posting, but it's something that you might consider in your deliberation on the conditional use request this evening. That is where I will leave it. And again, anticipate some questions for staff after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Steve Doran, West Broadway, Monona, in support, wishing to speak. And while he did not indicate that he's representing an organization, I think that he is, so maybe he could clarify that. Steve, you have 3 minutes. Who are you representing, please?
Sure, thank you. Steve Dorn with Galway Companies. I'm the developer of the site, so we are the applicant.
Thank
And I'm here. Yep. And I'm here together with Adam Stein and Wesley McDonald. I believe we've pooled our 9 minutes together. So
Yes, thank you.
I'll go. So I'll go quickly and then pass it off to Adam. I know many of you we've been in front of Plan Commission many times for projects we've done in and around the Madison area. As many of you know, we're a long-term holder of properties. In the Madison market, we invest primarily in retail properties that we build and hold for the long term. And we're very entrenched in the communities we work in. We live here, we keep our office here. And as a result, we become very vested and we take pride in making sure that we listen to the concerns of neighbors and surrounding businesses. As mentioned by Heather, we are here tonight asking for conditional use for the drive-through, as was situated here before. We believe our proposal significantly improves the existing conditions of the site, and we believe after working with staff and traffic engineering over the past several months that we have met the requirements for a conditional use to be issued. In addition to meeting with city staff, we've also had several neighborhood meetings over the past 6 months, those with Bay Creek Neighborhood Association, the South Metropolitan Business Association, and then also individual phone calls with other circles within the neighborhood. We've listened very carefully to the business community and the neighbors. And while we've not been able to address every concern, we believe we've used a good faith effort to address all concerns. I would like to mention that the issues that I believe we have not been able to address are primarily opinions on Starbucks and or the use itself, not necessarily the conditions we believe are required to be met as it relates to the Plan Commission approving a conditional use for the site. As Heather mentioned before, one of the things that we had kind of gone back and forth on with this site was a walk-up pickup counter for service. And initially we talked about including it. It was later decided by Starbucks to remove the walk-up pickup counter as the access to the site would have to cross a drive-through. After further back and forth on that, while the guidelines needed to be met in order to issue a conditional use for the site don't necessarily require the pickup counter, Starbucks has really heard loud and clear from city staff, as well as some of the neighbors and the businesses surrounding the site, that there's a strong desire for that. One of the people that we've heard from that we included a letter from and actually commented tonight, I'm hoping is here to speak, is Lindsay from Cargo Coffee. And, we were happy to hear that she wasn't necessarily discouraged by Starbucks as a use being here of adversely affecting her business. She thought it would rather encourage additional retail and restaurant growth in the neighborhood. She really withdrew our support once Starbucks decided to remove the pickup window. Starbucks and we both greatly value her opinion and also want to respect the desires of staff in the neighborhood. And so for that reason, we are going to ask that any condition of our approval tonight would include the requirement for Starbucks to open with a walk-up pickup window. This is a new concept for Starbucks in this market, so they wouldn't be able to necessarily agree to like a continuous obligation requirement, but it would require a significant change to the floor plan, showing a very large financial commitment to making this work. A few of the changes needed to accommodate that walk-up service would include a raised concrete walkway across the driveway to ensure safe pedestrian travel, and then a counter service within the front of the store that they don't typically have, requiring a new storefront entry and a completely reconfigured floor plan that would be special to this site. Heather mentioned before, we are reusing the building. We looked at a tear down or rebuild. Starbucks has over the past couple of years been trying to pay very close attention to landfill, infill, and reuse of existing buildings when able. They made a conscious decision here that they would like to reuse this building to limit any future trash going into landfills. And then as a comment, kind of a final comment, Heather had made the note about any cross-access agreements not precluding future assemblages of the site that would be part of the TOD zoning. We have already got those in place. The property that we would be buying this from is owned by the same guy to the north and the south, so that those are non-issues for us. So with that, I'll let Adam take over.
Okay, the next registrant is Adam Stein of Logic Design, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and representing Logic Design. Go ahead, Adam, you have the remainder of the 9 minutes or what you need up until that?
Sure, that's great. Thanks for the great intro, Steve. So you didn't leave too much for me. I think the important things for the members of the board and the public and everyone to realize too, and intentionally why we show these photos on the first page of the slide, is that across the board we really paid a lot of attention to trying to improve all of the little things in the site. So we're reusing an existing building, so there are definitely limitations. But even on the front aesthetics, you can see we're doing a very contemporary refresh. We've relooked at every aspect of the site and the circulation across the site, worked with traffic, worked with our civil engineers, and also worked with Starbucks directly. We design and build Starbucks kind of throughout the state. We've probably done 20 plus of them at this point. We know a lot of the data that they have on the drive-thrus. They're generally looking for ideally a 13-car queue, which is what they believe to kind of be their peak or their max. You'll notice the site plan here provides 15 cars. Also, all of the closing off to the south, all of those were intentional. Those were kind of as we worked with staff, worked with traffic, and worked through the UDC process. So we believe that drive-through queue is greatly improved. We believe that circulation is greatly improved. You'll also see that we're adding landscaping throughout the site. We're doing improvements to lighting. In addition to just bringing a national brand, right? The security that's in there, we're not going to have a vacant building. And we really believe that it's showing, Steve and his team's investment in the overall area. And I believe a lot of the public too believes that, reinvesting in this area and bringing in new tenants will hopefully continue to bring in additional new tenants and really kind of meet the overall goals of the neighborhood. So otherwise, I have no further comments, just here to answer any questions anyone has.
Okay, the next registrant in the 9 minutes is Wesley McDonald, Innovation Drive, Milwaukee Support, wishing to speak, representing Steve Doran, Logic Design. Wesley, you have the rest of the time available.
I'm still on. Wes is actually with me. He has no additional comments if I'm still on.
Okay, very good. Then we will move on to the other registrants. The next registrant is, hold on just a second, let me find it. Jeffrey Richter, Cliff Court, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Jeffrey, you have 3 minutes.
Sure, there's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, thank you. The next registrant is Ian Jamison, East Washington Avenue, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Ian, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, there's also no one in attendance by that name.
Okay, thank you. The next registrant is Caleb Holton, Meadowview Road, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Caleb, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, thank you for the time. So I'd really like to speak to what the city is trying to do with the transit-oriented development overlay and the money that's being invested in the bus metro system. This lot sits just a few hundred feet away from what I imagine is going to be and is a very popular bus stop and a very popular bike path. The road that the drive-through will be accessed from is a lower stress road than Park immediately to the west, and is used by bicyclists to find a better path. And adding this drive-through to this location is likely to increase stress to bicyclists and also not complement the metro and metro bus system and its goals. I'd also like to echo some statements that I want to say Alder Evers had in a letter that there's growing bodies of research that the idling cars in drive-thrus like this are negatively impact health of people in the immediate neighborhoods. It would be a positive way for Madison to move forward to outright ban drive-thrus, at least in the urban cores like this, that are along major transit routes. And I hope that Starbucks and other companies that seek to develop will find other ways to service people instead of through this drive-through method. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. The next registrant is Dave Davis, Kosher Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Dave, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to make reference to a couple of sections of the Madison General Ordinances. MGO 28.061, mixed use and commercial districts uses. In it, the table for mixed use and commercial districts shows that in CCT districts, vehicle sales and service windows are an accessory use requiring a conditional use permit. Since this project is now, or was up until 5 minutes ago, to be a drive-through only coffee shop, there's no longer any primary use proposed for this site. Based on the zoning code, the site cannot be used exclusively for a drive-through only coffee shop. MGO 28.104, Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District, the site standards for automobile infrastructure, which include automobile parking, drives, drive aisles, driveways, vehicles access sales and service windows and drives, shall not be allowed between the primary street-facing facades and the primary private or public street. The plans for this have such a drive between the primary facade and the primary street. We've been told that because that drive existed when Arby's was in business, that it can remain, that was there before, but there has been no use of that drive since Arby's closed almost 2 years ago. And they, as you stated, they lost their conditional use permit. So it seems strange that could be allowed to continue. And city staff have said that the requested conditional use permit is appropriate since Starbucks' use of this site would be much like Arby's prior use of the site. The prior use by Arby's was for a sit-down restaurant having a drive-through window. That earlier use ended almost 2 years ago. The proposal you're considering tonight is nothing more than a glorified kiosk that will only be accessible to drivers and perhaps pedestrians. This is not the community, pedestrian, or transit-friendly type of use envisioned for or by TOD overlay districts, the South Madison Plan, or Urban Design District 7. And finally, I would ask that before you begin your deliberations and vote, I ask you to consider whether or not the city is committed to implementing the recently adopted revisions to the TOD overlay district zoning. While the project before you might be viewed by some as trivial, whatever you decide tonight will set one or more precedents for development in all of the city's TOD overlay districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. The next registrant is Carrie Rothberg, Lakeside Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak, representing Jim Winkle, Andrew Mayer, Judy Robinson, Kristen Bloy, Jenny Hayes, Cindy McCallum, Janelle Munns, and Manuel Ramiger. And all of those are in the general neighborhood area around this proposal. Carrie, you have 3 minutes.
Carrie again, and that is *6. I assume you're probably trying. Looks like you're unmuted. Yep.
Great. Thank you. On behalf of the list of those red members of BCNA's council, I wish to point out that Galway's proposal has received an open-minded but unenthusiastic response from neighborhood members. We are the ones who've requested meetings with Galway, and at those meetings, we expressed these concerns. No sit-down service, no pedestrian focus, access on Bell Street could cause traffic congestion and safety concerns. The drive aisle parallel to South Park runs contrary to creating a safe, walkable, inviting street. And the business does not build the local economy or improve community wealth and self-sufficiency. These are all items mentioned as goals of the South Madison Plan, which states that public improvements, including streets, parks, pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and other programs and policies are key to improving South Madison. Drive-throughs do not further the goals of this plan, nor do they reduce reliance on auto culture or create sustainable development and transit. Now, speaking for myself alone, I'd like to make some comments about how this project falls short of the standards of conditional use. Standard 1 shows that idling vehicles produce more carbon dioxide than cars in motion, as well as volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, things toxic to humans. To the extent that this drive-through will contribute to the gentrification of the surrounding area and promote dislocation of the community, which is also something that is to be striven against, as listed in the South Madison Plan, this project should be viewed as contrary to public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. I will skip over Standard 4 since I do believe there are reasons to think about the shared access as possibly contributing. Well, it needs to be studied well, but I can't make conclusive comments about that. I can say on Standard 5 that the UDC has had this to say concerning adequate internal circulation and improvements, and now I'm quoting, "If you're increasing traffic on Bell, there's going to be a wayfinding problem." Another commissioner said, "For a business that's primarily a drive-through coffee shop, the site plan for cars and circulation stinks." In addition, supplemental regulations regarding vehicle access service windows require that site design accommodate a logical and safe vehicle and pedestrian circulation pattern. It's not clear to any of us who studied this that that has yet been achieved. Standards 7 and 9 can be treated together concerning applicable zoning regulations and creating an aesthetically desirable environment compatible with the intended character and purpose of the zoning district. There is no named exception to a ban on drive aisles parallel to the primary street, as Dave said, or for placing windows under the building in a TOD overlay district. So per the South Madison Plan, UDD 7 and
I think maybe you accidentally muted yourself.
I did not do that. It might have been my phone. I'm very sorry. I was nowhere near it. The Park Street Urban Corridor should be pedestrian. I am not doing.
Alder Sellers, you're muted.
I am not muting.
Chair Sellers.
Do you want me to stop?
Chair Zellers, you're muted, and so the speaker isn't hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. That concludes your available time, Carrie. Sorry.
Because I've been muted so many times?
No, it was prior to that. So thank you very much. The next registrant is Lisi Kitchell, Potter Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Lisi, you have 3 minutes.
Chair, that person is not in attendance.
Thank you. The next registrant is Linda Leonards, South Patterson Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Linda, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Based on your decision for the car wash and the reasons given, I expect this item will be placed on file. But however, the applicant did not commit to continuing to have walk-up service. He spoke of major changes that would be needed, and those changes should be before Plan Commission before there's any approval of this project. I'd also like to stress that the fact that the building exists only exempts the building from meeting the building requirements such as setback. I addressed a number of issues in my 2 letters. I'm just going to address one in my comment. That is the meaning of, quote, located under the building in which the window is located. I hope you can come to a decision on whether a mere canopy meets this requirement. The courts, when interpreting municipal ordinances, apply the same principles that are used in statutory interpretation. To determine the plain meaning of an ordinance, the courts look to the language of the ordinance as a whole. The TOD ordinance reflects a desire to screen auto uses from the primary street. Autos in front of the building, whether parked or moving, are deterred to the extent possible, and auto uses cannot be closer to the street than the primary building. An ordinance lacks plain meaning or is ambiguous if it is capable of being understood by reasonably well-informed persons in 2 or more senses. The zoning administrator is reported as believing a canopy is enough to qualify as being under the building. I disagree. If an ordinance is ambiguous, one looks to the legislative history to determine meaning. My letter discusses the legislative history of both the TOSS and TOD ordinances, since the TOD ordinance implemented the TSS drive-through requirements. The TSS and TOD legislative history reflects one clear fact. The vehicle access sales and service windows were to be under the building and hidden from the street. Hidden from the street meant that the vehicle access sales and service windows would not be seen from the primary street. This concept of hidden is further reinforced by the examples provided by staff at the TSS and TOD meetings. Some of the windows were truly under the building and parking areas. Other windows were within the building envelope. The old TOD ordinance that had been in effect since 2013 until last January, which was an overlay that could only be applied around bus stops, completely prohibited vehicle access sales and service windows in the TOD, along with 6 other auto uses. Obviously, there has been a long-standing concern about auto uses in the TOD. In addition, courts also consider closely related ordinances to reach a sound interpretation and to avoid absurd or unreasonable results. MGO 28151, the vehicle access sales and service windows, is a closely related ordinance, which makes clear that a canopy is not part of the primary structure. It is up to the Plan Commission to...
Thank you, Linda. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Lindsay Lee, Williamson Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Lindsay, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. I'm going to make sure my voice is low. I had some written remarks. I'm going to set them aside. First, I need to address, I do not support Starbucks. Hope everyone understands that as the owner of a couple of local coffee shops, I'm not a supporter of Starbucks. I was one of 3 retailers 20 years ago who were founding, help with the founding of Dane Buy Local. What I was responding to in a public forum, a neighborhood listserv, which I'm a member of, I saw a lot of my neighbors and friends on the listserv, worried that Cargo Coffee would disappear. That's not going to happen. Cargo Coffee will be fine. I've been in business for 25 years with 3 stores. I've seen over, I think, 14 stores, competition come and go, and I've done just fine. So that's not my concern. My concern is, so I probably should have added that in my email back in April, but I'm a realist. I'm not surprised at Starbucks now, after I've been there 22 years, that Starbucks views Park Street as fertile ground. I don't blame them. I thought it was 22 years ago. But when I wrote that email to the listserv, I did not know it was going to be drive-through only. I thought it was going to be a coffee shop. And let's be clear, this is not a coffee shop. No more than putting stuff out on your, in front of your house is an antique store. So please don't call it a coffee shop. It's a drive-through. And it's not Richard Florida's third space. So I've been involved for 22 years, pretty much since I opened with planning for Park Street. It's been a project of mine, like Williamson Street is, like East Washington is, being part of something bigger than just selling cups of coffee. Maybe my ego finds that important, but I have a passion for Park Street. I want good change. I'm thrilled that there's a grocery store opening across the street with a coffee shop in it. But let's be honest, this is not what we're looking for Park Street. When we did planning, the Wingrid Build, the urban design guidelines, Park Street Partners, the Planning Council, this is not what we were looking for. This is the opposite of what we're looking for. So please consider the detailed analysis of Linda Leonard, Alder Evers, Kathy Rothberg, Alder
Thank you,
Romo.
Lindsay. That concludes your available time. Apparently, Ian Jamison is now available. Ian?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak. I find myself in kind of a strange position, having spoken many times in favor of new additions to our neighborhoods like housing or restaurants. But in this case, I'm strongly opposed to the proposal for 2 reasons. The first is that it's an awful use of space. This is the site of the future bus rapid transit line. The nearby Brahms Addition, Vilas, and Bay Creek neighborhoods have been marked by urban footprint as 15-minute neighborhoods. Those are places where it's possible for residents to walk or bike to their nearby amenities or even go car-free. Under this proposal, that's all cast aside to prioritize drivers. Nearby residents are going to get minimal value from this proposal unless they own a car. But unfortunately, everybody's going to experience this project's costs. Drivers in the area are going to have to deal with increased congestion as more cars are lured by Cars First drive-through. These are going to be net new car trips as the site is not in use for that purpose today. Bikers and walkers are going to have to deal with increased numbers of cars that degrade their experience and make it less viable for them to walk or bike to their grocery store or other places. And nearby, everyone else will have to deal with the increased noise and pollution from those cars. It's clear that pedestrians, bikers, and bus riders are afterthoughts, with the walk-up option being added at the 11th hour, and its use not being formally and permanently committed to. There's no indoor seating at this drive-through, so it's clear where the focus is. I'd also say that gentrification is a term that gets thrown a lot with little justification, but in this case, I think it applies. This location's served predominantly by cars. Poor and working class folks are much less likely to own cars than the rich. Percentage of household without cars is 3 times higher for families of color than white families. This proposal caters primarily to the disproportionately white upper class group of car owners and leaves little to nothing of value to the disproportionately diverse working class folks without a car. That sure sounds like gentrification to me. Others have more specifics for why you should reject this proposal under the guidelines. I'd urge you to listen to them. It's a step in the wrong direction, and I hope you take a stand against it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ian. We have one more registrant that's available to answer questions. Jordan Rushlow, Nygaard Street, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Are there questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Heck.
Thanks. I'd just like to ask the applicant or somebody on their team. I think I can't remember who said it. Might have been Steve. I'm not sure about the commitment to a future or including a walk-up window. Yet I heard they can't make a long-term commitment to that. Can I just get a clarification that that's what you meant to say?
Steve, if you aren't the one to take that, indicate who on your team would be, please. Steve Doran.
All right, I was unmuted. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that this is a new addition that we discussed earlier today, and I think the conversation really was, we don't know exactly how it's going to operate. It's not something we've done before. We recognize the neighborhood has a desire for it, and if that's important to them, it's important to us. We don't know exactly if the hours are going to be exactly the same as the drive-through, or the operation of it is going to work exactly like the drive-through. So I think they were just looking for a little bit of flexibility in how, the walk-up facility there worked in the hours that it was open.
Okay, thanks. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Hi, could the development team talk about the queuing of vehicles? In your materials you show, I think you mentioned a diagram with 14, 15 cars sort of queuing there. What I'm concerned about is, once again, the queuing of cars going into Beld. Beld, is that the street sort of behind it? Can you talk about ways to mitigate that, or to make sure that that doesn't happen? That cars going through the drive-through will once again queue up and go into the street.
Yeah, I can touch on that, and then Adam, if you'd like to add something, please feel free if I miss anything. This is something we worked really closely with Sean Moy and traffic engineering on. Right now, there are curb cuts along Park Street that are being closed, and there was a desire from traffic engineering to close those and route some of the traffic in through Beld Street. Sean felt that based on what a typical Starbucks does, and I don't want to speak for Sean, but our interpretation of what Sean's desire was here is to route some of the traffic through the neighboring property and through Beld Street. And he felt that the stacking that we were providing would not cause issues for Beld Street. As Adam indicated, Starbucks typically looks for a stack of 12 to 13 cars. Sometimes they'll open stores where there's an 8 to 10 car stack, and here we have a 15 car stack. So I don't believe there are any issues that we will be encountered as far as traffic backing up into Beld Street.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is just because there's a Starbucks on Stoughton Road near Flom Road, and it does brisk business, and a number of times those vehicles will queue out into the nearby sort of service road and that sort. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Shepherd? No. Okay. Alderfield.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. I have two questions actually for the applicant. I'm wondering if you can talk about why you are proposing a site that is drive-through, or where customers would be external to the building, instead of making any space available within the building in what I understand was a restaurant before, with seating and a full kitchen.
Well, a couple of things. One, they have, and again, I'm the developer here. I don't operate the Starbucks, but we've had extensive conversations internally about this. And the decision to make this drive-through only with now walk-up service counter is twofold. One, the parking here is not that ideal for a cafe, but in addition, Starbucks does have a few cafes in close proximity to this, and they just didn't see right now the need to add the in-cafe seating. Now, that doesn't mean that in the future that they couldn't add it if, things continue to, if there's a demand for it in the future, or things continue to grow up and there's a need for it. But as of right now, they do not believe there is a need for additional Starbucks cafe seating. And again, this is really meant to be a supplemental store for them in the market, and an added benefit for the neighborhood and the commuters that come up and down Park Street.
Thank you. And my second question was about the posting, the sign posting that hadn't gotten picked up. I was wondering if the applicant team could just speak to whether that was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or something else at play there.
100% our fault.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Do you have any other locations in the city that mimic what you're trying to do here?
I have a few other Starbucks. So we just built the Standard on the corner of First Street and East Washington Avenue, which is an apartment building with commercial on the first floor, and we have a Starbucks on the ground floor there.
We
don't have any. We don't have any. They don't have any other drive-through onlys in this market as of yet.
Thank you.
We got a very late registrant, and I would like to find out from the commission if you are amenable to reopening the public hearing. Okay, see a couple of thumbs up, so I will reopen the public hearing. The registrant is Bob Klepa, Gorham Street. Bob, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the coming in out of order. I did register at 6:19 tonight, so I don't know where my registration went. Also, I'm sorry that I didn't register for agenda item 13 as well as this one. The commission's motion to place agenda item 13 on file was the right one for the transit-oriented development overlay district zoning. Nevertheless, I think 1609 is a more salient test for this zoning. I first encountered transit-oriented development in the early 1970s on a junior high field trip to Toronto, where we attended a presentation on their subway and light rail transit network. Their city staff emphasized how important it is to promote intense commercial and residential development along these transit corridors. This early exposure to sensible urbanism encouraged me to support our city's BRT and TODOD zoning when they were up for review. You and Common Council recently passed a bold zoning overlay district that does the same as what I learned about 50 years ago. Our transit-oriented development overlay district emphasizes uses that promote walkable neighborhoods, public transit, and faster access to our cultural resources to those living farther from downtown and elsewhere in the city. Applying this overlay district requires promotion and restraint. Developers are already following the city's promotion at Easttown, Odana Road, and along other high-frequency transit routes. Restraint involves discouraging automobile-oriented development in the overlay district. This means that developments focused on automobile services and automobile-accessible services should not be approved. Tonight, we are looking at the proposed development of a drive-through service that has been designed to exclude access for pedestrians due to the potential conflict with neighbors and passersby on foot, bicycle, and skateboard. This contradicts the spirit of the overlay district by promoting an automobile accessible service and by decreasing walkability of the neighborhood. I strongly encourage the commission to place this conditional use application on file. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Are there any questions of Bob? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this will be for Heather or Jacob, but honestly, I'm kind of confused by the zoning questions and interpretations that to me are really at the heart of this matter. Questions about interpretations of whether the existing drive-through is, somehow grandfathered in, even though the conditional use permit expired. And so the interpretation, if I have this right, is that the infrastructure is what's driving that interpretation. It's unrelated to the previous use. It's about the building and what was there, and that's kind of confusing for me. But maybe Jacob, can you kind of explain that and why they're allowed to have a tiny canopy as opposed to where we want to go? I understand that that's also rooted in the existing building, right?
For sure. Yeah. So it sounds like there's maybe two questions. One about the drive aisle that accesses the window, and then one about the location of the window. So I'll just I guess I'll do the drive aisle first. So in the TOD overlay, there's certain things that trigger compliance. We talked about or Heather talked about the building, the site standards for buildings requiring a 50% addition or new building. Then there's the auto infrastructure, which includes drive aisles, parking, driveways, anything that's sort of auto related. And the TOD overlay applies to new auto infrastructure. So the fact that this auto drive exists, they can continue to use it. We wouldn't have the authority in the zoning code to tell them to rip out an existing driveway as part of a conditional use that they are allowed to obtain. So the use is allowed. It's allowed as a conditional use. And so I guess that's sort of the key, is that the drive aisle exists. They're not expanding it. They're not making it any more non-conforming than it was. And so that means that it can stay. The other question about the drive-through. So I do want to just clarify that it is not a canopy. A canopy is a defined thing. It has posts and a roof and no wall. This is a wall. So it's a building addition. We would consider it a building addition for purposes of setbacks, for other things in the zoning code. It's not a canopy or an open porch, which we have in our code and are allowed in some other places that a building addition would not be. This is an extension of the building. And so, our understanding and our interpretation of the zoning code is that, under the building means under the roof of the building, enclosed inside the building. It's obviously sort of an unusual case, because if this was a new building, it would have to have a second floor. And so there would be that opportunity to integrate it, with a floor above it. Like some of the other examples that we've talked about and that were talked about when TOD was going through Plan Commission and Council. Obviously, this doesn't apply here. It's a single-story building. There isn't a requirement that it be a two-story building, because there isn't a 50% addition occurring. So the addition that they did build encloses the window. It puts it under the roof of the addition. And so the zoning administrator's interpretation is that satisfies that requirement in the TOD overlay.
Okay, thanks. That was helpful. Just one other question then. We've heard some public input about let's say there wasn't a ability to walk up and get coffee, that it was just as it is proposed in the materials that we're reviewing. Is there some case to be made that there's no primary use and that the drive-through is an accessory use? And is that somehow a problem?
We would still consider it to be a coffee shop. So, I mean, coffee shop is a defined thing in our code. It says an establishment engaged principally in the sale of coffee, tea, and other non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on the premises or for carryout, which may also include the sale of a limited number of food items. So the method of dispensing the coffee, of transferring ownership of the coffee, would not impact the use, other than the fact that if that purchasing occurs through a drive-through, through a vehicle access sales and service window, then that's an additional conditional use. I will also point out that the zoning code requires that any drive-through also serve cyclists by bikes. So just so you're aware of that, even if it was just a window, that is a requirement of the zoning code. So, but that's neither here nor there. I think for your question, yes, we would consider the coffee shop to still exist as a coffee shop, even if the only method of buying coffee was through the window.
Thanks. You actually preempted one of my questions about bikes. Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple questions. I think they're for Heather and Jacob. The first question, so if the developer and Starbucks would agree to do the walk-up window, would this have to, we couldn't approve it tonight, right? Wouldn't they have to go back to UDC and have them review the design and go through all of that again?
Good question. I'll take that one. I think that the Plan Commission would have some options related to that question. The Plan Commission could require that all of the physical improvements be completed to accommodate walk-up service, and could include the raised pedestrian crossing, the walk-up window, and interior changes as a condition of approval. And then staff, when reviewing the final plans that come in for interagency staff review, would see that condition of approval and would need to verify that those changes had been made to the site plan. So that is one opportunity. I think that the changes on the exterior of the site and building are would probably be pretty minimal to accommodate that. So I think that would be one option. But another option the Plan Commission would have would be to refer the item to a future meeting and basically assign the applicant team with completing those changes in advance of returning to the Plan Commission.
Okay. Thank you. That's kind of what I thought. And then my other kind of question or comment is that we've approved other sort of coffee kiosks, or I guess I can call them coffee shops. I think Mocha is the one that has the largest market share in Madison with the, drive-through or bike throughs. I haven't seen anybody walk through those, but I'm sure it happens. And and we've sent them back because they've had sort of problematic, issues with traffic. I think even tighter traffic flows than even this one too. And I think the biggest difference is that those weren't in a TOD overlay area, right?
Good memory. So the Mocha coffee that was just recently approved on the north side, it is in a transit-oriented development district, but it wasn't in play when that application came in. And so all of the transit-oriented development ordinance requirements didn't come into play. Because as I recall, that was a new building. If it had come in under TOD, it would have needed to be a 2-story structure. And yes, it did have some difficulty meeting the circulation and queuing on that multi-use site.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you.
Commissioner McCahill.
Thank you. So if we were to approve this on the condition that it had a walk-up service window, would it also be within our authority to require that remained open for the same hours as the drive-through?
I think so. I think it could be part of that condition. And you've heard the applicant's take on what they would like to see there, but yeah, I think the Plan Commission could tie that to the hours of the open hours of the drive-through itself.
Thanks.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner McCahill? No. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. Along those same lines, we could require a walk-up facility, and if that were to cease to exist, would they lose their conditional use permit if we were to require that be in place?
If it were required to be in place for the long run and they wanted to change that, then they would need to come back before the Plan Commission to make that request as a major alteration to the conditional use.
Okay, thank you.
So in short, yes.
Yeah, thanks. That was my question.
Any further questions of staff? Any further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking then for a motion. Wait, I think the Alder of the district would like to speak. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Plan Commission members, and all the participants from the public who have spoken about this controversial proposal. I am not going to be reading from the emails that I sent you already and the previous comments. I will assume that you've had an opportunity to read them. But what I'm going to be doing is making reference to the 4 standards that I included in those two emails that I believe are not met, and adding at the conclusion of my remarks a 5th standard that I believe is not met. First of all, a significantly expanded drive-through facility runs counter to public health and safety and violates standard 1. And to buttress that argument, I'd like to recall with you a conversation that I had via email with the city's traffic engineer, where I reached out and asked, really, how did you, I find this, by the way, kind of odd, the internal circulation for this proposal, and asked him, really, why was traffic engineering willing to sign off on this? One of the comments that he made that he felt mitigated their concerns about traffic safety and other operational issues is that the pedestrian service window was removed by UDC, and the walk crossing the drive aisle mostly would serve coffee shop employees instead of the public. Therefore, I bring that up because traffic engineering found that there were safety issues by having this walk-up facility and a principally drive-through, almost exclusively drive-through facility that circumnavigates essentially the building. Because the drive-through facility that supported the old Arby's location was much different than what is being proposed today. If I'm not mistaken, that facility had customers placing their orders at the back of the building, picking up their orders on the north side, with most customers then exiting the premises via South Park Street. At no point would vehicles be queuing up in front of the building. And because the old Arby's was also a sit-down restaurant, very little idling occurred. This current proposal calls for a drive-through facility that largely encircles the building and creates the potential for multiple pedestrian vehicle conflicts. While the applicant has been ambivalent about this pedestrian walk-up access, the internal circulation remains problematic and does not represent an improvement which is required by Standard 5. The increased idling from this greatly expanded drive-through facility is a clear threat to public health, as I noted in the email addendum that I sent earlier today. A drive-through facility that supports a business and is an accessory to a sit-down business is different in type from a drive-through facility that functions as the primary means of serving their customers. This greatly expanded drive-through facility would measurably increase vehicle emissions and air pollution in this immediate vicinity. And these increased emissions are also a matter of concern with respect to our climate emergency and therefore are contrary to general welfare interests in the city. Again, Standard 1 is not met. And as I noted in my email to you, this greatly expanded drive-through facility would involve 3 parcels, creating legitimate questions about how approval of this application might impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. The possibility for more intensive development, including a mixed-use apartment building with first-floor retail, providing much-needed housing and enhancing walkability, might well be impeded should this conditional use be approved. Hence, Standard 4 is not met. Now, I realize staff is making the argument that since this project does not involve a new building or a greatly expanded building, the conditional use should be granted under the terms which prevailed prior to the adoption of the TOD overlay district earlier this year. Well, it is also true that this is neither a new building nor does it constitute a major expansion. The use that the conditional use applicant is seeking, this conditional use, has undergone, as I spoke earlier, a major expansion. Staff is suggesting this major expansion of use can be overlooked because the site standards are not triggered. It can be argued, as Linda Leonards and others have noted, those site standards for buildings are specific to building elements and were not meant to give a pass to a greatly expanded drive-through facility. I encourage Plan Commissioners to consider the legislative intent of the TOD Overlay District Ordinance. It was not to give a pass to a greatly expanded drive-through facility simply because the applicant was previously permitted a conditional use for a much more modest and less impactful drive-through. In short, I don't believe conditions demanded by Standard 7 are met with this application, as the regulations in the TOD Overlay District do not permit this type of queuing in front of the building. The applicant's inspired conditional use does not provide legal standing to expect a waiver of the TOD regulations, and Plan Commission would therefore be correct to deny. That's 4 standards that are not met, 1, 4, 5, and 7. But I'd like to add another, and that's Standard 9. Plan Commission shall find that the project creates an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area and the statement of purpose for the zoning district. As my colleague Alder Rummel noted in her email to you, Plan Commission has cause to disregard UDC's final approval. Allow me to quote from the UDC staff memo. The applicant shall revise the elevations to meet the UDD 7 requirements for entry orientation and window openings. The UDD, the Urban Design District 7 windows and entrances requirements state that non-retail buildings should have at least 40% of the street wall devoted to windows. As proposed, staff have estimated the window coverage is roughly 32%. Well, this is undoubtedly an improvement from the previous iteration with 25% window coverage. The street-facing elevation still does not appear to meet this requirement, which the UDC does not have the ability to waive. For some reason, UDC waived that requirement, but you do not have to. You have an obligation granted to you by Standard 9 to ensure this project creates an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area and the statement of purpose for the zoning district. Not only does the front wall street-facing window coverage fall well short of the required 40%, consider for a moment the impact of a long row of idling vehicles in front of Starbucks for multiple hours at a time, and ask yourself if this comports with the intended character in the statement of purpose for the transit-oriented development overlay district where this is found? I think the answer is obvious. It does not, and therefore the application fails. Standard 9. In conclusion, that's 5 standards: 1, 4, 5, 7, and now 9 that raise serious questions that should give you pause. But it doesn't take all 5. You only need 1. To approve this application, you have to find that all the standards are met, while also giving due consideration to the comp plan and the applicable neighborhood plans. And while this site is located just outside the boundary of the South Madison Plan, the South Madison Plan offers a clear vision for the entire South Park corridor, one that limits gentrification and encourages community wealth building. I therefore ask you to deny this application and place it on file. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Evers. We have another Alder wishing to speak, Alder Knox.
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize to Alder Evers, who should, as the district alder, have the last word on this issue in his district. So I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted to support his statements in saying that I oppose this proposal. I've had several constituents of my own in my district, other neighbors living around the facility, interested parties, and several alders expressed concerns relative to this proposed project meeting the intent of Madison ordinances as they relate to the zoning codes. Now, you've heard people far more articulate and knowledgeable than me express those concerns. So I request that you respectfully respond and resolve those concerns before making any consideration of approving this. But more specifically, the proposed access on Bell Street negatively impacts 14th District residents as well as the 13th District residents who frequently travel on Bell Street to access South Park Street, going to Cedar Street, Wingo Street, and Gilson Street to access John Nolan Drive and Park Street. In addition, there are frequently parked cars who are going to, there's a restaurant on Bell Street. There are other events, a small microbrewery and bar on Gilson Street. And in addition to that, there's a bike path of traffic crossing Wingra and Bell Street. This proposal could, in my opinion, cause traffic congestion and traffic safety concerns at a major thoroughway in the neighborhood. And I was just recently thinking there are also school kids that go to that corner heading towards school. So there is a lot of concern about the traffic, the pedestrian traffic that goes up Bell Street. And the other thing that seems a little strange to me, I don't know why more consideration hadn't been given to some access and entry from South Park Street, because there are several businesses on Park Street: Dunkin' Donuts, Midas, Magic Car Wash, and others that do enter and exit on Park Street. And the traffic flow and business access, I think, should be a critical consideration in terms of how it impacts the neighborhood residents. And then finally, my constituents have expressed the desire to have a destination business and allow sit-down service in the neighborhood. You heard Lindsay Cargo Coffee talk about that. That is something in our South Madison plan. We want a walkable, livable, enjoyable neighborhood like everybody else. And I really just think we're very opposed to a drive-through only business. Business that just comes in, picks up their coffee and goes. It's just not conducive to what we want for our neighborhood. I'm not aware of very many people in this area who support this project. And I have a lot of respect for the property owner who's had some supportive businesses in our neighborhood, but this one I just have an issue with. So what I would implore you is to think about the implications on the neighborhood this project would have, how it might impact the future composition of the neighborhood, and even the status of Starbucks as a brand, their employees. There are a lot of concerns that have been expressed to me by many people in my district. I'm very much a pro-business person, trust me, pro-development, but in this case, I would suggest that you oppose this project.
Thank you, Alder Knox. Seeing no raised hands, I am looking for a motion. Oops. Sorry about that. Commissioner Heck.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take a stab at this. I move that we refer this conditional use proposal to a future plan commission meeting, and I can explain my rationale if I get a second.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field.
Thanks. I think there are I think many well-meaning reasons to place this on file, but I think we need to give the applicant the opportunity to put before us what they're really planning on doing. And I know that there's been some last minute changes about a walk-up window, but I'm concerned about what came up about traffic engineering's being concerned about how pedestrian circulation would work. It's not just add a drive-up window and everything's fine. I think we've seen this with Mocha and other locations, that how pedestrians are handled is really important. And I think they need to work with traffic engineering and the folks at Starbucks or whoever to work out those details, and then we'll potentially have before us what their plans actually are. I honestly am not excited at all for this facility to be placed anywhere in the city, more or less in a TOD overlay district. But I don't know. I mean, I don't blame Starbucks for taking advantage of the situation and not constructing a new building that would then put them under all the TOD regulations. I know there was some reference to altruistic motives of reusing buildings on Starbucks' part, but that certainly has provided them with an advantage zoning wise, also regardless of their desire to recycle things. So anyway, I'm going to give that a stab and see what folks have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion, comments? Commissioner Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Commissioner Heck. I think as opposed to our earlier one on East Wash, this one I think has some merit in it at the basic level. And if it's developed out further for what we've been talking about, that it gives us something a little bit better to weigh against all of the standards. I think right now it's, we're kind of in the middle, and I think not knowing what the walk-up window, with better traffic flow, the sidewalk improvement, I think it's kind of hard for us to really
give it a full nay or yay. So I think referring is a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McCahill.
Thank you. I think deferring this is fine, and I will support that. And I was actually thinking for a while that's the way we should go. The more I think about it, though, I really think that this really doesn't meet the qualifications for a conditional use. So there was confusion about TOD that I was kind of wrestling with. Just like we wouldn't require a building to meet new setbacks, right? They should be allowed to use the existing infrastructure. But it really is a new use. Unfortunately, as it has sat idle for a long time. And now we're talking about a new use that doesn't conform with the intent of TOD. And I think Alder Evers made a pretty compelling point that this doesn't really meet a lot of the criteria for conditional use, including it's not clear that it won't impede the surrounding properties because of traffic or pedestrian access or anything like that. So I think this is going to be a challenging one to meet in my mind, even with more time to work through the pedestrian access.
Thank you, Commissioner McCahill. Alder Field.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate and respect the sentiment behind the motion for referral to hear more about traffic engineering's perspective on pedestrian car conflicts in the drive-through. I think along with other commissioners who've spoken, I have concerns about the compliance with standards that would not be ameliorated by learning more about that specific piece of information from traffic engineering. So I'm not going to support this particular motion because I am prepared to place this on file tonight. But again, I totally understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Field. Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, if this were to come back to us at some later date, I think there should be a more detailed outline in terms of the traffic, the queuing, that sort, to have a few more alternatives in place. When I asked the question earlier, the developer said, yeah, they looked at a couple of different plans in terms of how to reduce queuing, how to make sure queuing doesn't go into the street and that sort. I think it would be, if this were to come back before us, I think it would be good to have that laid out. What are those plans so that we have something more concrete to look at? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Alder Figueroa Cole.
I'm just wondering if Commissioner Shepherd wants to propose the language for a friendly amendment or a change to the motion that Commissioner Heck presented.
Well, I guess I can. Yeah, I would. So what is the procedure here? Do I just state that, or?
You could move to amend the motion.
Move to amend the motion to include an update regarding queuing of cars on the property.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second. Thank you.
Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Okay, we have the amendment on the floor. Any discussion of that? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent on that amendment unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, that amendment is now part of the motion. Now we are back to the main motion as amended. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, it's my opinion that Alderfield has some insight that there are a number of standards here that apparently are not met, or at least should give you pause. And I don't think those will be addressed if you're able to get more information from traffic engineering or even more information about the queuing. And that again, there are 5 different standards that are certainly, and you only need one. I think there is ample reason to place this on file, and I think you're simply kicking the can down the road, because it's fundamental to this proposal, some of the obstacles that they're simply not going to be able to overcome. For example, standard 9, they would have to go back and address the window coverage, which for some reason or another, just because UDC passed on it, doesn't mean that is something that you need to approve. There will still be queuing in front of the building. That does not comport aesthetically with the character of the TOD district. That part of it, I think, is undeniable before you as a standard that you need to find supported before you can approve this conditional use application. So I would just caution you, by referring this, you're merely kicking this down the road. You're going to be left with the same difficult decision. Actually, I don't think it's that difficult. I think it's quite clear. So I would encourage you to do as Alder Field suggested and vote to place this on file tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote. And I am going to ask Heather to please do a roll call, since we know that it's not unanimous. Heather?
Sure. Let's see. Commissioner Heck.
Aye.
Commissioner McCahill.
No.
Alder Duncan.
Aye.
Alder Field.
No.
Commissioner Spencer.
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard.
Yes.
Vice President Figueroa Cole.
Yes.
Commissioner Mendez.
Yes.
Okay, I have 6 ayes and 2 noes.
Okay, motion passes. So we will be seeing this back again. Next is business by members. Any business by members? And then we have the secretary's report. Heather?
Sure. Thank you once again. As you know, we will be holding a special meeting on September 7th, and the main focus of that meeting will be to work through proposals for changes to the generalized future land use map as part of the comprehensive plan interim update. And so that'll be the main focus. Again, that meeting will be held virtually in order to provide easier access to what we anticipate as probably a lot of public registrants for that meeting. And the outcome that we hope for is general guidance from the Plan Commission with no formal action, but just providing direction to staff on as many of those as we can work through. I believe, Chair Zellers, I'll look at you, but I believe we are committed to keeping that from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock maximum, yes, as with all of our special meetings.
Yes. We've been successful in the past, so hopefully that will be the case.
Yep. Looking forward to the September 18th regular meeting. I'll mention a few of the key items there. We'll have a replat of Acacia Ridge, plat number 5. That's out on the far west side. A 2-story building on McKee Road, 6853 McKee Road, that I would expect that we have some registrants interested in that proposal. I'll mention 680 Grand Canyon Drive, a demolition and construction of a new 4-story building with 185 square feet of commercial space, so a very small commercial space, and 60 apartments. And then finally, at the end there, 6302 Odana Road, a conditional use for conversion of an office building into apartment hotel units. fairly small project, but an interesting conversion that we don't see a lot of. And then looking at October 2nd, 139 West Wilson Street, demolition and conditional use for demolition of the existing 4-story building for construction of a 16-story building with 320 dwelling units. I mentioned 2102 and 2202 Darwin Road. This is the site that's been at Plan Commission recently for discussions related to potential zoning and the River Food Pantry. This rezoning and demolition of the existing building and certified survey map will be before the Plan Commission on October 2nd. And then finally, on 3100 East Washington Avenue, a 5-story apartment building involving the demolition of a car sales facility. A lot of exciting things ahead. That is where I'll end it this evening, and look forward to seeing you all on September 7th. Most of you, I should say. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And then I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Mendez, seconded by Alder Field. And I will assume unanimous consent on that vote unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, we are adjourned. Take care. Have a good week.